Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today for this meaningful event for Apollo 11 moon landing and Vikings Mars landing anniversaries. Today we have 4 distinguished speakers on very exciting topics. So please enjoy, and have fun. And just a few words, actually all our section meetings like this, e-town hall meetings are also network events. Unfortunately, this is online, but you can still benefit from the chatting room to interact with each other and the speakers. And just a few words about the junk mail, spam mails. If you are on our mailing list, you should receive our regular notices. If not, please check your spam folder, junk folder, and throw them out, or ask your IT department to change the setting. Or if they delete it automatically, please provide an alternative email so our email can reach you. Really appreciate our AIAA headquarters who provided this great Zoom platform and all the support they have for our activities. If anyone got disconnected due to internet connection issue, please keep trying to connect. It should be resolved right away. If your internet Wi-Fi bandwidth is not very stable or limited, please use the dial-in instead of the internet audio. And you can still use the Wi-Fi for the video, but you can use dial-in for audio. Please try to use your real name as sign in so people can recognize you. But if you don't want to share, then don't try, nobody knows you are here. So again, if you want to chat, please type in your chat box. But if you have a question, please put it in Q&A box. More toward the end of presentation of each one will enable you. If you click raise hand, you will be able to speak out. Also, please don't talk about any sensitive personal or business information for security, even though Zoom has improved a lot for security and privacy issues. Just a few words about Southern California. We are really, really blessed for this highly intensive aerospace activities here. The James Webb Space Telescope from Northrop Grumman, Defense, JPL, the exciting SpaceX, and Virgin Galactic, Virgin Orbit, Aerospace Corporation, and many interesting things, and also many things like the 3D printed rockets, relativity space, launcher space, more 3D, and hybrid aircraft, flying cars like Ampere, and also many great companies, Boeing, Honeywell, Raytheon, LG, Lockheed Martin. We keep doing this event so people can network together, have fun, know each other. That's the main point. We keep everybody together, move forward. August 14th, we'll have the Space Velocity Gathering event. And August 21st, we celebrate the Women's Equality Day with the AIAA Women Professional event, led by our AIAA fellow, Miss Mary Wheaton from Aerospace Corporation. And we also have happy hours like July 20th, and this is great month. We have virtual event on our AIAA Los Angeles Las Vegas moon-based Alpha virtually on Travis Crater, the moon. It's very exciting. July, you have Richard Branson, Jet Bezos, those kind of things. And also the great Apollo 11, Vikings, many things. And July 31st, and we have Professor Khan from India. So we once in a while have speakers from around the world, attendees around the world all the time. So it's a great opportunity to learn what's going on in the world. And Professor Khan is actually the leader in the world of lighter than air development. And we also have newsletter opportunities. So you're welcome to participate. Sorry, I'm kind of doing this a little bit slowly because I want to wait more people to join, so didn't intend to delay the program. So newsletter is a great opportunity for people to show your hobby, photography, or professional articles, or things like that. For example, this one in May, we posted the news about unfortunate nuclear Astronaut Michael Collins. We also have post videos on our YouTube podcast, if permitted, from the speakers and their organization. So if you're a member of AIAA, you got many great benefits. You really start to share, be engaged. You can talk to AIAA members, professionals around the world. And you can get the insider news. It's called AIAA Daily Launch. And Aerospace America magazine is highly regarded. It's very exciting. You can get it free for electronic version. And you really enjoy great discount for going to conferences. And AIAA have 5 major forums conferences. It's all very exciting. The one most related to space is Ascend in November. Is to continue our flagship space conference previously. So AIAA has a different level of membership. Is to promote the aerospace activities. So you can see there are different levels. Student high school membership is free. Educator is free. And the young professional is actually should be called early career professional because they're actually professionals after universities and under 35 years old. And it's half price right now, greatest discount. And the best way is to email here, custserve@aiawa.org, or just give them a call. It's very fast right away. But if any question, I'm very happy to answer. We are very happy to answer. This high school membership, just very easily. And different level membership, you can advance your levels. These are highly regarded, very prestigious. For example, our section chair, Dr. Jeff Michelle, is our AIAA fellow, Miss Mary Wheaton, and the president of Aerospace Corporation, Mr. Steve Izakovich. And also many great names, Dr. Dan Raymer, Dr. Martin Bradley, Dr. Henry Gary. And honorary fellow like SpaceX, well-known, our Gwynne Shotwell is honorary fellow, and former Air Force 4-star General Alan Polakowski. Of course, Buzz Neil with us, and also Gerstenmaier, Bill Gerstenmaier is with us right now. And you can honor yourself, our people, to nominate for different level contributions. So we keep doing events, just quickly overview. This is Professor Khan, talking about development in India, and Tuskegee Airmen with their family and great gathering, which is fantastic. And we have planetary defense workshop, and these are all distinguished speakers. It's from everywhere, JPL director, John Hopkins, very exciting. And Aerospace Corporation also developed very great workshop to help people learn how to use the NEO deflection app, and also help people understand more about the threats from astral or near Earth object. Very good STEM outreach for any general public. And we have also people talking about materials in extreme space environment, and also ANSYS, the computer simulation company, who just acquired AGI SDK and the Phoenix integration for model-based system engineering. Very important step for aerospace. So our first distinguished speaker is Dr. Jennifer Ross-Nazzal, is a historian from NASA Johnson Space Center. She's in this position, she provides reference assistance to NASA and the public, and has shared her expertise with journalists, writers, broadcasting agency, documentarians, and many others. She was awarded her PhD from Washington State University, master's in history from New Mexico State University, and bachelor in history and political science from University of Arizona. She holds the distinction of being a scholar of NASA history and women's history. She has been featured as a subject matter expert in several documentaries. She's also an accomplished oral historian and authored many publications. In 2015, the Texas State Historical Association awarded the Least Carpenter Award for research to Texas women, their histories, their lives, a book containing her chapter on Mae Jemison, the first female astronaut of Congress. In 2012, Jennifer was awarded the Charles Thompson Prize from the Society of History in the federal government for her chapter focusing on shuttle accident in NASA's Wings in Orbit, Scientific and Engineering Legacies of the Space Shuttle. Her essay, You Have Come a Long Way, Maybe, the first 6 women astronauts and the media, was included in Spacefarers, images of astronauts and cosmonauts in the periodic area of spaceflight in 2013, and noted as fascinating and in-depth study on how the first group of NASA women dealt with the still occasionally sexist media. For this work, she received her second Thompson Prize in 3 years. In 2011, he published her first book, Winning the West for Women, a biography of suffragist Emma Smith DeVoe. The same year, she was recognized by NASA headquarters for her outstanding work as historian for the agency. Her latest manuscript, Making Space for Women, focused on the history of Johnson Space Center through the experience of its female employees, and will be published this fall through Texas A&M Press. As you can see on the right-hand side, the book covers. Very exciting. And just a quick note, AIAA, as mentioned, on August 21st, we'll have Aerospace Women Professional event. This is to celebrate Women's Equality Day, which is on August 26th. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Jennifer Ross-Nazzal. So our next speaker is Professor Paul Ronney, is an astronaut. Professor Ronney is the professor and chair in the Department of Aerospace and Mechanical Engineering at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. He received a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from the UC Berkeley, and a Master of Science degree in Aeronautics from the California Institute of Technology, and Doctor of Science degree in Aeronautics and Astronautics from MIT. He held postdoctoral appointments at the NASA Lewis, now Glenn Research Center at the Laboratory for Computational Physics at the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory, and the position as an assistant professor in the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering at Princeton University before assuming his current position at USC. He was the Payload Specialist astronaut for Space Shuttle mission MSL-1 STS-83 from April 4 to April 8, 1997, and the refly of this mission STS-94 from July 1st to July 16, 1997. He has extensive research experience in small-scale combustion and power generation, turbulent combustion, flame ignition by transient plasma discharge, micro-scale combustion, bioengineering, robotic insect propulsion, insect frames, flame propulsion, flame propagation in confined geometries, helioshell cells, internal combustion engines, premixed gas combustion at microgravity, and the flame spread over solid fuel beds. One of his experiments, a study of premixed gas flames at low gravity, flew on 3 space shuttle missions. He has published over 80 technical papers in peer-reviewed journals, made over 250 technical presentations, including over 35 invited presentations at international conferences, holds 7 US patents, and has received over $12 million in funding for his research project. In recognition of his achievement, he is a fellow of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers and the Combustion Institute, and associate fellow of the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics, and is recipient of the National Science Foundation Presidential Young Investigator Award. He has received the Distinguished Paper Award from the Combustion Institute for work published in the Proceedings of the Combustion Institute, Volume 37, and the Starry Premium Award of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers for the best paper of the year, published in the Journal of Automobile Engineering. So let's welcome Professor Paul Ronney.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thank you, Ken, for this opportunity, and thanks to Jennifer for a wonderful presentation about the life of Michael Collins. I'm sorry that I was on a camp as it turns out, I accepted this invitation, and then a camping trip was rescheduled during this time. Fortunately, I was able to drive to a place where I could, I'm over in Sequoia National Park. Those aren't sequoias behind me, but in Sequoia National Park, and found a spot overlooking the Central Valley where I could get decent 4G coverage so that I could participate today. Let me see if I can share my screen for my presentation. That works. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so first of all, I have to add a couple of qualifiers to this presentation. I am an astronaut in NASA's definition of an astronaut is that if you look at astronaut biographies, they say so-and-so was selected in such and such a year and became an astronaut in such and such a year. And that is not when they flew in space and exceeded the von Karman line, but actually when they completed their training. So I was an alternate payload specialist astronaut for 2 missions back in 1997, but I didn't actually fly in space. So I've been through all the training, and so by NASA's definition, that I do qualify as an astronaut. So I wanted to mention that. And also I have to mention that my experience is now quite, as a number of years ago. So, so everything I have to say has to be qualified in that context. But I've tried to frame it in such a way that I think most of what I'm going to say, even though it's based on my experience from a long time ago, I think a lot of it still applies now, at least I hope so. And again, I'd like to thank the AIAA Los Angeles, Las Vegas chapter for this opportunity. And feel free to interrupt me, by the way. Feel free to interrupt me along the way with any questions you might have. I don't mind being interrupted in the middle. I just have, I think, 12 slides or so, so I should have no trouble getting through what I have to say in the time available. All right, so first let me say just a little bit about myself. Ken has said most of this, so let me just say that I'm also, my daytime job is as professor, now chairman of Aerospace Mechanical Engineering Department at USC. You know about my background and research doing. I had experiments flown on 3 space shuttle missions, the 2 that I was a backup for, and then STS-107, which of course was the last Columbia mission, the one that burned up on reentry. As it turns out, because I've been the backup on the previous missions, under a slightly different set of circumstances, I would have actually been on that flight. At the time, I was disappointed that those circumstances didn't work out, so I wasn't able to fly on STS-107, but as we all know, that was a good day to stay home. So as you can see, the lower right picture, let me see if I can get a laser pointer here. Okay, yeah. So, okay, so that's a recent picture of me. This is me from taken in 1996. Hey, that was, so that's 25 years ago. So, yeah, okay, a little older, but, and I still have my COVID hair, haven't cut it yet. My daughter is really into horses, so I've gotten into horses too. I call Cavalier here my executive vice chair of the Aerospace Mechanical Engineering Department. And this is where I was back on Wednesday. Okay, so on to the meat of the presentation. First of all, what are the types of astronauts? Really, as I see it, there are 4 types. There are the pilots, and some of this sort of, again, dates back to the shuttle era, which is long gone, but a lot of it still applies. There are pilots that are responsible for the launch, landing, and on-orbit operation of the vehicle, whether it be the space shuttle or Dragon capsule or whatever, chosen by NASA Astronaut Selection Board, and most of them are military pilots. There are mission specialists who are responsible for payload operations, science experiments, spacewalks, or stays on the space station, and again, chosen by NASA's Astronaut Selection Board. And then there are payload specialists, which is a category that first came about during the Skylab era. I believe the first payload specialist ever was by Byron Lichtenberg on STS-9, the first space lab mission. And they're chosen because of their particular scientific or engineering need on a particular flight. And let's see if I can move this. Excuse me for just 1 second here. That doesn't look like I can do that. Okay. Or in some cases, actually, for political means. For example, a Saudi Arabian prince was flown pre a Challenger on a space shuttle flight. And other examples is Alain Ramon, who was on STS-107. He was chosen because we had flown a Saudi Arabian prince, and President Clinton at the time said, well, we have to have parity here. So we have the Arab side, we have to have the Israeli side. We need to fly an Israeli astronaut. The Israelis chose Alain Ramon, who was actually a military fighter pilot, and then became the first Israeli astronaut. Unfortunately, of course, was lost with the rest of the Columbia crew. John Glenn was another payload specialist. Myself, again, as an alternate, and I'll get more into that in a bit. So these are not present on most flights, but they might become more common. It occurred to me, people who might be considered payload specialists will become more common as manned commercial space flights become more common. We'll see, but that remains to be seen. And now, of course, the other category that's becoming more and more common are paying passengers. So let me just talk about mission specialists and payload specialists and my personal experience. Okay, so in 1990, I reached the interview stage for the astronaut class of 1990. And there were about 100 people interviewed in 5 groups of about 20 each. You get to know those 20 people pretty well. It's a week-long process. There are I don't need to get any details, very thorough medical and psychological exams, but it's really a pass-fail criteria. It's not like they pick the best athlete or the person with the most, with the fewest little, red marks on their medical record. It's really more of a pass-fail criteria. Then you have, also you get to go on some cool tours. You get one interview with the selection board itself, and then there's also a social event, which you aren't required to go to, but basically you are required to go to. And you meet with the selection board and other astronauts who choose to attend. You're also expected to meet with other astronauts at the time who are not part of the selection board, but are just in their offices doing their jobs, and meet with them because they will then report back to the selection board. Oh yeah, I met Paul, and oh, he seemed like a nice guy, or oh, he didn't seem to know what was going on, or whatever. Now, one question that comes up is, and this occurred to me, is many of those who reach the interview process, I'm going to say probably 80 out of 100 of those people who reach the interview process are perfectly qualified for the job. So how do you choose? How does the astronaut selection board choose out of those 80 people? About 20, or I think maybe 23 were selected that year, including my dear friend, now departed Janice Voss. Many of them, how do they choose? And I'll get into that in a bit. Then there's the other category, payload specialists, that I mentioned, which I was also part of. Now, the way that I got in through the payload specialist program was that there were 4 combustion experiments manifested for STS-83, which was the Space Lab mission MSL Microgravity Science Laboratory 1, including my experiment. And so NASA approved, the principal investigators requested, and NASA approved a combustion payload specialist for that. So when that went out, of course, my hand went up. There was also a payload specialist for the materials science, because there were quite a few materials science experiments in that Space Lab mission. So I was interviewed by the selection committee appointed by the mission scientist, who was Mike Robinson at Huntsville, at NASA Huntsville. And I was chosen not as the prime, but as the backup, as the alternate payload specialist for combustion. As it turned out, the alternate for the materials position, he dropped out. And so I became the backup actually for both, which, people said, oh, he's not going to want to train for both. I said, well, I'm fine with that. That gives me twice as many opportunities in case some mysterious accident or illness would happen to one of the prime payload specialists, either in combustion or material science. Although I'm a combustion scientist, not a material scientist. There are some similarities, and so I felt qualified to run those experiments. So how does one improve one's chances? And this is based on my experience in both with the mission specialist selection, which I was not selected, or for the payload specialist, which again, I was selected, but as the alternate. I would say the ideal candidate, and I've said this to many people, and I've actually been successful. Like just shortly before Jennifer Sidey, Canadian astronaut, before she went for her interviews, I had met with her. She gave a seminar at USC, and we talked about this. And guess what? Boom, she was selected. I like to think I may have played a small part in that. So first of all, you should have a PhD in a science or engineering field. The exact field isn't that important. They're not looking for stellar academicians. They're looking for people who have accomplished, what it takes to persevere and see your way through a PhD program. Military aviation experience is, I think, extremely useful. And even if you're not qualified as a pilot, maybe because your vision isn't good enough, but even if you're a backseater, communications, weapons officer, that sort of thing, all that aviation experience, I think, is extremely useful. And operational experience. Of course, military aviation is one of many examples of operational experience. That is, you don't just sit, maybe if you're the most accomplished person in the world in some field that's very relevant to what an astronaut does. But if you've done that all sitting behind a desk, I think you're going to be less qualified for that. For example, during my interview for the mission specialist position, I was asked if I had any emergency situations. I had put on my application that I had a private pilot's license. I was asked if I had any emergency situations there. I also mentioned that I'd done a lot of mountaineering, and they asked me if I had any emergency type of situations and that. So they're looking for that kind of operational experience, whether it's sort of within your profession or even outside your professional activities, just in your personal activities. Civil service experience, I think, is very useful because, as an astronaut, you are a civil servant, and that comes with all the benefits and challenges associated with that. And you say, well, what civil service position? The best one is an astronaut trainer. Quite a few, not to say quite a few, but a number of astronaut trainers have become selected as astronauts themselves. And why is that? Well, who selects the astronauts? Well, current astronauts. And who do the current astronauts know very well and spend a lot of time with, besides other current astronauts? The astronaut trainers. So you get to be known by those people, and like I say, a number of people have been selected through that process. Also, you need to show some aptitude as a team player. And this is where I think I lost out. Think about, as an academician, as a faculty member, no faculty member was ever chosen because they were thought to be a good team player. They were chosen because they were thought to be an outstanding individual, right? And that's not what the astronaut corps is looking for. Like, for example, one very telling question, I also put on my resume that I was, captain of our intramural at MIT, of our department's intramural ice hockey team. Nothing special really, but I really like playing ice hockey. And they said, well, why do you like to play ice hockey? And I said, well, I like the speed and the skill that's required and the contact and all that, and all the excitement, yada, yada. After the interview, I realized the right answer would have been, I like the teamwork, right? So for almost any other position other than being a faculty member, you always want to talk about your ability as a team player. Even if you're going to interviewing for a position as a lighthouse keeper or a forest fire lookout, where you're on your own all the time, you want to say, I'm a good team player. Okay. Also, I think what's useful is to have some sort of little special thing. I call it a shtick, gimmick, something just kind of makes you stand out in your personal life. I can think of a couple examples, like Ellen Ochoa was a concert pianist, or Dave Brown had been, before he became an astronaut, had been sometime in the past before he'd been become an astronaut, he had been a circus acrobat. Or like even on the missions I was a backup to, Mike Gernhardt had been a commercial deep sea diver, on oil platforms. It was interesting to hear his stories about that. So he said there was a lot, that was a lot harder than doing spacewalks, doing the underwater work that they did on oil platforms. Also, I remember being asked a couple of oddball questions. I guess I would just want to see how you react to very odd, strange situations. One was, are we doing enough to combat the drug problem in this country? And I kind of maybe fumbled my way through that question. I said, well, yeah, I think we can never do enough, and but I think we need to eliminate not the supply, but the demand. We need to reduce the demand within the US. Okay, maybe came up with some sort of a semi-viable answer. And then I was also asked, when you curl up at night with a good book, what do you like to read? And I just read, just by coincidence, a friend of mine had given me this book called The Rivers Ran East by Leonard Clark. It was about his expeditions right after World War II in the Amazon looking for the lost cities of El Dorado. So I said, well, I like to read books like that, adventure books. That was probably a good answer. Still didn't get picked, but however, maybe this is the most important thing I can say about this whole talk. My disclaimer is that even if you do everything perfectly, even if you check all these boxes, the chances are 99.8, and if you play your politics perfectly, chances are 99.9% that you won't get selected. So you better choose a career path that you really enjoy doing. If you're doing all these things just because you think it's going to improve your chances of being selected and you really didn't want to do those things, you're going to really have an unhappy career. So keep that in mind. Let me give you an example of one person who was in my interview group for the mission specialist program back in, we were interviewed in 1989. They were announced in 1990. Tom Jones. Tom Jones had gone to the Air Force Academy. He then flew B-52s for 6 years or so. Then when he left the military, he had a desk job, or sorry, then he got a PhD in astronomy from, I think, University of Arizona or Arizona State. And then he had a desk job with the CIA, civil service position, not a spy, but someone who like monitors, satellite, spy satellite contracts, etc. So he kind of had everything. He had the military experience, the flight experience, the civil service experience, the academic. He kind of had it all. He was one of, for my group, I picked 4 people who I thought were going to get selected. Tom Jones, Rick Searfoss, Jim Halsell, who by coincidence being the commander of the mission that I trained for, and Scott Horowitz. Scott was the only one of the 4 that didn't get selected, but he got selected 2 years later in the next round. So at least I think that I had, at least based on the criteria at that time, I had learned what was expected. And I didn't expect that I was going to get selected because of what I just said, that my whole background is all about being, the one in charge, the one in control, the top dog, not being a team player. And I'm sure little things like that came out. Okay, now I'd like to discuss, the training itself. So there are basically 2 types of training. There's the orbiter at the time when I was doing space shuttle. There's that related to the spacecraft itself. There's launch and entry, using the launch and entry suits, living in space, and eating in space, and all of those things associated with the orbiter. Also things like, we spend a lot of time, I'm really, you can say I'm in the outdoors here, I'm really obsessed with, nature and with Earth observations. So I actually spent a lot of my time, when I wasn't doing training that it was absolutely required, but I could squeeze in some extra training. I really wanted to learn more about Earth observations, how to take pictures of the Earth from space, and then how to, learning to know what to take pictures of that people on the ground would be interested in hearing about. Actually, after the mission, after the July mission, I asked the crew, well, why did you take so many pictures of the Middle East? And Roger Crouch, one of the people I was back up to, said, that's the only part of the Earth that isn't covered with clouds in July. Although sometimes cloud patterns can be very interesting as well. Also, you learn about media appearances. One thing I remember from the media appearances is never put your hands up above your head. Always keep, you can use your hands to gesture, but don't put your hands up above your head. Tidbit like that. And then there's payload related training. In my case, the payload was the Space Lab mission. And you have to learn first about all the experiments, the science background, the procedures and schedules. We've spent a lot of time going through the procedures and actually helping the experiment teams to rewrite their procedures to make them clearer for the crew to use. And sometimes even finding little things that they had overlooked. Like I remember on one experiment, there was to photograph droplet combustion. There was little fuel droplet suspended on a wire, and you had to then put a scale before you actually did the experiment. You put a scale inside the test chamber with a ruler on it, and then you took it out, and then you put the test apparatus in itself in the same position without moving the camera, so that you know what the scale was when you saw the droplet or saw the flame surrounding the droplet. You know what the scale was. But then I noticed that there had never been anything in the procedure to say record the ruler. You know, so the trainer wasn't a scientist, didn't really understand. So then I finally called up the project scientist, and I said, Veda, the person I knew very well, I said, hey, Veda, look, you got to add this line in the procedure to take some video of the scale before you take it out and put the experiment apparatus. And he said, oh, yeah, of course. And so we actually did a lot of what I found that the astronauts did that was useful wasn't just what they did in space. It was what they did based on their training on the ground and their experience on the ground. Like I'd flown many, many times on the KC-135, not as part of the training, but as part of doing experiments in the lead up to my own experiment. We'd flown on the KC-135 many times. And a lot of sort of the operational things that we learned that carried over, I think, into the into writing procedure, helping the experiment teams write and refine and modify their procedures. Also doing the experiments themselves, of course, and on-orbit repairs as needed. Although 90% of the on-orbit repair procedures are simply the same things you do at home. What do you do when something, like if my phone here, there's no Wi-Fi here, so I have to connect a tether through my phone. And, you know, so if there's anything wrong with their phone, what's the first thing you do? You restart, right? So it's the same thing, you know, in space. You basically power down systematically, you know, and then power back up systematically. And that's 90% of the on-orbit repair procedures. The one thing I will say about the whole process is that I would say it's straightforward. Now, many of you probably saw the movie, read the book, The Right Stuff, about how harsh the training was. I talked to one of the original 7 Mercury astronauts who said they spun him up to 12 Gs in the centrifuge. He said he was black and blue for weeks after that. But it was not like that at all. It was really much more straightforward. By far the toughest part was all the travel. This was back in 1996, 1997, before everybody had a cell phone, before every rental car and airline and hotel was online. So I spent many, many hours, because the schedule was always changing. The training schedule was always changing, because either some simulator would break, or some crew that was closer to launch who had higher priority would bump us for a particular simulator, or somebody got sick or whatever. The schedule was always changing. So I was always changing and remaking travel arrangements. So I spent hours and hours and hours tethered to a payphone at an airport, going back some time, making and changing all these reservations. And not being the mission specialists, they had the opportunity to fly backseat in a T-38. They basically had a T-38 taxi. If they weren't pilots themselves, that Jim Halsell was the commander and Susan Still was the pilot. So of course they could fly themselves. And then for the mission specialists, who were Mike Gernhardt, Janice Voss, and just a second. Why can't I think of
Crouch?
No, he is a payload specialist. Greg Linteris and Roger Crouch were the Don Thomas. Don Thomas was the 3rd mission specialist, and then Greg Linteris was a combustion payload specialist, and Roger Crouch was the materials payload specialist. But like I say, so all of us, the 2 of us, or the 3 of us, the mission payload specialists, had to fly commercial everywhere, and that was actually pretty draining. Now, one of the best parts, Roger Crouch in particular was very good about relaying the whole experience to me. He said, well, the first thing is, he was a scientist himself, of course. And he said, I know all the principal investigators, because he'd been actually head of the microgravity science division in NASA headquarters. So he had basically been responsible for selecting essentially all the experiments on that flight. And he said, I know people have been working on these things, and I've asked these questions for years. And until you push that button, you really don't know what's going to happen. And you're the first person who gets to push the button, and you're the first person that gets to see what happens. And he actually did my first experiment, and it just completely blew me away. I was just stunned. I mean, that's a whole nother talk, about what my experiment was and what happened as a result. But yeah, it was completely unlike anything I had expected to happen, which is a good thing, really, because if you do an experiment and you just get the result you expected, well, what new thing did you learn? You just were able to reconfirm what you already thought you knew. And then the other thing Roger Crouch said is, he said, the first time you look out the window, it's like the first time you peer over the rim of the Grand Canyon or turn the corner and see Yosemite Valley for the first time. No matter how many pictures you've seen of it, it doesn't prepare you for the real thing. I think everybody comes back a little bit changed from that experience. Okay, so in terms of the classroom training, these are very old pictures, but I intentionally use these old pictures because these are the ones that I used back when I was going through the program. This classroom training mentioned, shuttle equipment and operations, communications, emergency procedures. I'll show you a little video on that, photography, and so on. And I love this picture of eating M&Ms with the window in the back, window out into space in the background. Then there's also living in space, eating in space. Every crew has to bring back some video of playing with their food in space. And yes, the space shuttle toilet. One thing I heard about the space shuttle toilet, it works very well, but it doesn't work perfectly. I don't think I need to say any more. Okay. And then for certain, not for payload specialists, but for at least 2 mission specialists on each flight, they were trained for an EVA in emergency. In this case, there were no scheduled EVAs, but if there was some sort of emergency, particularly if the payload bay doors wouldn't close when it was time to come home, then Don Thomas and Mike Earnhardt would then do an EVA to try to fix the problem. And we all did flight training. We all one flight in the back seat of a T-38. And after, of course, you have to go through like ejection seat training and water rescue training. We, for example, you see in the center picture, they basically do parasailing. Take you out in a boat and then send you up. And then when the instructor waves his flags, you release and you come down, land in the water, and then get picked up by a helicopter. One thing to remember about that, I still remember about that training, is that you must let the cable comes down touch the water before you grab it, because the static electricity, there can be a very high voltage difference between the two, and if you grab that, you can get quite a shock. So you let it touch the water first, then you grab it. I say I got one flight in the T-38, and I will say, flying in a T-38, Susan Still was the pilot, and I was in the back seat. And at one point she said, well, do you want to do a barrel roll? I said, well, okay, let's do a barrel roll. I said, take the stick. Oh, you want me to do it? Well, okay, I'll try. And so rack it over to the right, a little more, oh, not quite that much. And before I knew it, I looked up out the overhead window and I saw the ocean. We were upside down. I mean, it was, using the, flying the T-38 was like using the mouse on your computer. It's almost that easy. Of course, I had one of the best pilots in the world in the front seat to make sure I didn't mess up. But still, it was, I was impressed with how, just for even, something like doing a barrel roll, how easy it was. Then she said, you want to do a loop? I said, well, okay. So she said, I'll do this one. So she took us into a dive, and then we pulled up, and she said something like 3 Gs, and okay, I could feel the 3 Gs. It was getting, and she said 4 Gs, and at 4 Gs, I started to get this tunnel vision. I learned about the tunnel vision in training, but I didn't really think much of it. I didn't, oh, no, that doesn't happen. But sure enough, it was 4 Gs, and all of a sudden I had this tunnel vision. And then she said 5 Gs, and my vision was about like this. And I realized, if this tunnel closes, I go night-night. But fortunately, we didn't go above 5 Gs. And so then the tunnel opened again. Okay, so what I'd like to show you is a little video I put together. This is first flying on the T-38, on the KC-135. This is supposed to be a video. It looks like we don't have enough bandwidth to really, you're seeing a series of images, at least that's what I'm seeing, and not the video itself. This is the high G training. I will say after, going to the centrifuge training, my reaction was, this is all it takes to get into space. The maximum is 3 Gs. It's really not that much. You see, there I am at 2.7 Gs doing the Macarena. On the second run through the centrifuge, I tried to shake my head, see if I can make myself feel nauseous. Nothing. There was our T-38 flight. We also did emergency egress, and we trained on that a couple of times. And we could get out of the shuttle. We're all suited up and with all of our communications and air hoses and cooling hoses hooked up. We got about 2 minutes, which is a long time for an emergency, but that's about as fast as you could do it. And of course, the last one out is a pilot. You can see, and this is about all I can do. Under other scenarios, on landing, you might have to land on the runway and then have to rappel out. And this is showing that, where they would actually jettison the overhead hatch and then you would actually rappel out. We also did water survival training. There. I'm sorry, this is a video, but I guess because of the bandwidth here, all you're seeing is a series of images. At least that's all I'm seeing. And you actually, you bail out with this little raft in your with your parachute. Okay, so here's launch day. And this is inside the orbiter just before launch. And this is what it looks like right at liftoff. And I'm sure most of you have seen these sort of videos before. And this is inside, right at solid rocket motor separation, as its little flash. This is the inside of the Space Lab module. My experiment is this big bulky thing over here on the right. Let's see if my mouse will there. Like about 5 maneuvers behind. This is one of the combustion experiments, not mine. This was called LSP, laminar soot processes. And then this was my experiment, the flame balls. These are little balls of flames in very, very weak hydrogen, oxygen, inert mixtures that can burn. It is a little ball of flame. Can't exist on Earth because the gravity would just cause the little balls to rise to the top of the chamber and extinguish. But a Russian physicist had predicted them in 1944. No one had seen them experimentally until I accidentally did in 1984 in drop tower experiments. There are also fluid mechanics experiments. I give this talk also to elementary school kids. So I say, well, in space, you have to do the same things you do on Earth. You have to brush your teeth, you have to shave, you have to exercise to keep your bones and your muscles strong. You have to wash your hair. And she said it worked well on her hair, and if it works on her hair, it'll work on anybody's hair. And I say, your parents always tell you never to play with your food, but every crew comes back with some video of playing with their food. You see this guy over here and trying to eat what I think is a meatball. And after about 4 tries, he finally gets it down. And you have to plan ahead in space, otherwise you can have a disaster like this. And then there was, not an our experiment, another experiment, there were fish swimming. They get very confused because they want to float with their back up. And here's some views of the Earth. There you can see the Middle East, the Red Sea. Oh, there's the Red Sea. You can see in the center of the screen, and the Mediterranean on the right. Our mission was during the peak of the Hale-Bopp comet. So Don Thomas actually got some beautiful pictures of the Hale-Bopp comet setting through the Earth's atmosphere. Amazing pictures. And this is me on the ground. I was the alternate payload specialist. My role was to communicate with the crew while they were doing the experiments. And then after 4 days in the first flight, that was the one mission that was cut short because of a fuel cell problem. And then the reflight, which was a full 15-day mission 3 months later. Then you come back to Earth. I was on the the shuttle landing trainer aircraft, which is a NASA Gulfstream, they put it into reverse thrust to get a steep enough glide descent angle. It's almost like a helicopter approach, but that's what they have to, that's what the shuttle flies like, and that's what they have to train for. Okay, and so with that, I would like to thank the AIAA Los Angeles, Las Vegas chapter for this opportunity to present my thoughts on this, to Ken Liu in particular for inviting me, and to all of you for listening. And with that, I will take any questions you might have.
Oh, this is really amazing for all you went through and all those interesting story from, a scientist, the leading person, and the teamwork, and this is a lot of insight. Very, very interesting. So anybody, if you any question, please raise your hand. Yeah, sorry, previously we have some, yeah, Bob has a, Bob, I think you can go ahead. I think your mic is on.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Professor. That's was marvelous, and I enjoyed seeing the STS-94. I was present there for that launch on that day.
Oh,
that was very, very impressive, as always. My question is that the shuttle missions were limited to just a few days, I think maybe 12 days at most or whatever. What is your understanding of the procedures now and used on the International Space Station, since they have much longer durations of crew stays? Has that changed the way the principal investigators design their experiments?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say absolutely, because now, back then, everything was about the timeline, because we had, 15 days to do everything. And, you just wanted, obviously, every investigator wanted to cram as many experiments into the limited time that was available. Now, for some experiments like combustion, I could go into the physics behind it, but you can do, even with, a few minutes of low gravity, you can actually do a lot. So we can get a lot of tests up. Some things like crystal growth, or obviously anything involving, growth of organisms, takes a much longer time. So, like I say, this mission was mostly, let's say, material science and combustion and some fluid mechanics and some protein crystal growth experiments. So, but again, it was all about the timeline, and that's what I told us over and over again: return to baseline. Remember, if you got off schedule, do everything possible to return to that baseline. Because if you don't return to the baseline schedule, there's a whole domino effect. Whereas nowadays on the space station, that you don't even necessarily know when it may be scheduled a few weeks in advance, and then because of some experiment ran overtime, or some equipment had to be repaired or something like that. That schedule, it's sort of I will say it's somewhat more of a relaxed environment, because you have so much more time available. I will also say one thing I noticed on STS-94. I mean, STS-83. I mean, because it was a 4-day mission, we only had 2 days, to do all the experiments. For those of you who don't know, there was right after launch, they noticed some sort of a fuel cell problem, which actually probably turned out to be just a monitoring problem, not an actual fuel cell problem. But because of flight rules, they had to bring the mission down. We did have about 2 days to actually do experiments. So we were just frantically replanning, just so every investigator could at least get some experiments, because we didn't know at the time that there was going to be a reflight of the whole mission 3 months later. At that point, we'd heard some the NASA minister saying they may take out of the shuttle program, may take the attitude, you paid for your ticket, this is what you got. So we were all frantically trying to get some data before that. So again, it was all about replanning, just to get some amount of information. And we actually did get some really good data just from that, which helped us with the second mission 3 months later. Let's see, was there anything else I wanted to say? I think that's what I wanted to say. But it's a great question about, back then it was all about the timeline and the planning, and a huge amount of effort went into setting up that timeline, and then replanning it for something that none of us had ever forecasted. I will say the NASA combustion, or the NASA Lewis, now NASA Glenn, but at that time called NASA Lewis Research Center, the lead for combustion, who was Howard Ross, said, "Hey, you guys, you got to plan for contingencies if there's a short mission. And we all kind of rolled our eyes thinking, oh, this never had anything like a shortened mission. So you got to, you investigators have to decide how are you going to, replan, how are you going to reassign time if your facility goes down, then you say, okay, all the investigators in that facility will take the hit evenly, or if your particular experiment goes down, then that's on you, etc. So we did a lot of that sort of planning. It isn't necessary for the space station because, and if something, you can do some experiments and then have some more samples flown up. If you say, hey, that was really cool. Oh, and one thing I did want to say is that on STS-94, we had a full duration mission, that I can only describe what we had sort of right in the middle of the mission when everything was going really smoothly. We worked out a few little bugs and everyone was just working at full speed and everything was going great. The principal investigators had what I can only refer to as a data feeding frenzy. They were just going nuts, saying, hey, well, this is great. Give me another one. Give me another one. We have a little more time, asking the timeline planners, hey, is there enough time for Roger to do one more experiment on this or that? I call it the data feeding frenzy. The other thing I would say is once you've had an experiment flown, in space and you have all that time and such good quality of low gravity, there was an accelerometer system called OARE that was very, very sensitive, could read, sub micro G levels. And on some of my test runs, the average G level over the test was 0.3 micro Gs. You get spoiled really quickly when you have that much quality and that much duration of low gravity. We'll go back to doing drop tower aircraft experiments again. Okay, I'll stop with that. Let's see. So I see a couple of other questions. You applied to be, this is from Sarah Baatout. Thanks for sharing your unbelievable experience. I've applied to be an ESA astronaut. What was your most challenging part of the astronaut training? The intellectual, the physical, or the mental part? Well, it's certainly not the physical part. As I said, in my case, it was the travel. But that wouldn't be as much of a case now because we all have, if anything changes, we all got this phone here. We can all change our flight and car and hotel reservations, in the blink of an eye. The mental part, I would think probably right now the most challenging part would probably be just because, by design, I'm a scientist. And so I'm not really someone who is involved in operations. I mentioned a few other things that I've done on the side as my hobbies. But, you just have to you have to be on the mindset of, particularly like say on these short duration missions, it's all about the timeline. It's all about it's all about following the procedures precisely, things that scientists are generally not necessarily the best people at. So I would say that's probably the challenging part, is to sort of, flip your mindset to get yourself in that operational right now, what's happening right now, and what do I need to do in the next minute, the next hour, the next day, which is not the way scientists usually think. We think, narrowly and deeply about our thing because we're trying to understand what are we seeing and why are we seeing it and what is it telling us. Here you have to think, let's say, much more instantly and much more broadly. Did that answer your question, Sarah?
Yes, you did. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, Seth has a question. Seth.
Hey, Professor. Awesome presentation. Thank you. I was wondering if you had any recommended exercise regimens for aspiring astronauts. Now that the gyms are opening up, I need some motivation to go out and exercise.
Mm-hmm. I guess what I would say is, remember I said something about it helps to have a gimmick, a shtick. So just trying to say, oh, I do weightlifting isn't going to cut it unless you're a world champion weightlifter, which a few of us could be. Certainly not me. But one thing I did do before the mission was I had trained and run a marathon. I would suggest that's something you could really point to as something specific, because most people don't. It's if you running a marathon, believe me, is like anything else. You just got to put your mind to it, put in the time, and almost anybody can do it, unless you have particularly weak knees or hips or something like that. So I would think that something like that, that's really something more that you can point to. Or like I said, I did a lot of mountaineering. And that, you know, helps out because then that's also, you talk about the operational aspects of, you know, the planning of the expedition and what happened and what went wrong and how did you overcome those obstacles? Were you successful? And if you weren't, you know, how did that affect you? Those sort of things. So I would think something like that rather than going to a gym. Now, maybe I'm biased because I've just never been a gym person. I never work out at a gym. Like say, I run myself. And I can't even run on a treadmill. You know, I had to, you know, during COVID, I had to sort of find areas where there weren't too many people running so I could kind of avoid them. And because I just, me personally, I just can't work out at a gym. So that would be my suggestion. But like I say, it's always nice to have something that and this is true of any job really, something that kind of makes you stand out a little bit, something identifies you. Oh yeah, the marathon runner, or the mountain climber, or something like that. Or this, like I said, that one in Dave Brown's case, the circus acrobat. Not that he was doing circus acrobatics at the time, you know, he was selected, but you know, it was something in his background.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? Yeah, obviously this is a short version. You know, we can see that professor actually had a lot of experience, including the astronaut and his combustion work, all the kind of things, very professional. This is a short version. I'll give everybody a sense how to become an astronaut. So, okay, so if no more questions, let's thank Professor Ronney, and we can have another opportunity. Yes.
I've got some more questions. I don't know how much time do we have left for the next speaker?
Yeah, if you would, please just keep it at one question.
Yeah, okay.
Because we do have to go with the next speaker though.
Okay, sure. So, Dr. Ronney, so this is the question I get from most of my aerospace students. So what are the exact, like, because I know like no one is perfect in terms of like physical and mental, you know, psychological health. So what are the red flags basically to disqualify someone from becoming an astronaut? Because, you know, you talked mostly about, you know, the education aspect of it, and, you know, how do we basically be operational and all that stuff. So I think this is one of the most important, because a lot of people, they get, you know, they're technically they might think they might be even disqualified. So they don't even dare to apply.
I would say it doesn't hurt to apply. The worst that'll happen is they'll say no. In terms of things, that's an interesting question. What would disqualify one? Well, let's see, in terms of the physical, I would say in terms of the more important aspect, in terms of the competency aspect, if you can't demonstrate that you are A, a team player, and B, can deal with an operational, what's happening right now, you know, situation, then that's, you know, that would be disqualifying. If for whatever reason you were thought of as being someone who didn't meet those criteria. Like I remember one time my niece, I took her on a whitewater rafting trip, and you know, she was having a lot of trouble, you know, doing the whitewater rafting, and she said, well, you know, and she was very athletic, but she said, you know, well, it's like when I go climbing, you know, I don't have any trouble climbing even in really difficult climbs. And I told her, look, when you're climbing, you can hold onto that rock and you can take as much time as you want to decide to contemplate your next move. However, when you're on the river, that rapid is coming. You have to react now. So you see the difference there? Yeah. Okay. But in terms of, but in terms of the physical, if you asked about the physical part, I'm trying to think of what would be, because, you know, Roger Crouch, at the time, you know, I was back up to him. At the time he was selected, he was 57, which at the time seemed very old because I was like 39. Now I'm 64, so it doesn't seem so old anymore, of course. And, you know, he was not, you know, nothing against Roger. He was a great guy. I love Roger. But, you know, he was not an awesome physical specimen. And I'm sure he would admit that, wouldn't mind me saying that. And he did fine in space. You know, it's just, it's not that harsh anymore. It's not like it was during the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo days. I'm trying to think of what would be obviously if you have you know, some sort of a noticeable heart condition. You know, I'm thinking about anemia, anything like that. One thing, as far as I can tell, is not disqualifying is any sort of motion sickness, because it's not something you can test for.
Right.
Even if people who get motion sick on airplanes or boats do not necessarily get sick in space, and vice versa. They're just completely different. There's apparently no test to really see who's going to be susceptible to that. And virtually everybody overcomes it within a few days. Actually, quite interesting that on the STS-83, you know, some of the people kind of, you know, got sick. And however, when they reflew the entire crew 3 months later, nobody got sick. It was like, they said it was like they were never not in space. They just instantly readapted, even though they were only in space the first time for only 4 days. 3 months later, it was, in terms of their body adapting, it was like they'd never left space. Now you might ask though, well, since both Roger and Greg had a chance to fly, maybe one of them should have given up their seat to me on the reflight. And I thought about that for a second. I realized, you know, they'd probably rather donate a kidney than give up their seat to me. And that turned, well, I didn't need a kidney, but so as I say, it was, and in fact, as far as I know, it's the only time in the history of the space program that exactly the same crew has flown twice. Someone correct me if I'm wrong about that, but at least at the time I heard somebody say that, and I'm not 100% sure that it's true, but I think it's the only time exactly the same crew has flown in space twice.
I have another question, very quick though. So
Sure.
let's say, you know, someone is a PhD candidate in a STEM field, you know, let's say aerospace engineer, and do you think that becoming an Air Force or Navy pilot is going to help them basically to, you know, go up to the, you know, top list in terms of, you know, becoming an astronaut, you know, because I know like you kind of mentioned, you don't choose that like military route just because you want to be an astronaut, because anyway, your odds are really, really low. But again, I think it's they want to see like, you know, they want to see if you're multi-talented, like, you know, how much of a person you are in terms of being operational, you know, being aspirational, you know, sociable, you know, in a team group work and all that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, very important, I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, glad you mentioned that. The way I would describe the whole interview process for the mission specialist program, and I presume it would be the same now, it was very much like a fraternity or sorority rush. So I would say if you weren't in a fraternity or sorority, that you get some kind of experience like that. That's, you know, that's just purely social, but you develop those sort of skills, or do something maybe like Engineers Without Borders, something like that. Because, you know, to me, that's the way because as I mentioned, of these 100 people, probably 80 are qualified for the job. How are they going to pick? They're going to pick people they like. And, you know, so just like at the, you know, at the fraternity or sorority rush, you know, there's all these people coming in. There's only, you know, 15, you know, seats or beds available in the frat house. And how are you going to pick? You're going to pick people that you like. You think, especially, they're going to say, well, do I think I could? One person said they're going to base it on, could I see myself going into space with this guy or this gal? I don't think that's quite the right thing. I think it's, can I see myself training for many months or years with this person? Because during the mission, you know, everything is happening so quickly. You don't even have that much time for, you know, personality quirks to develop. It's really during the training where all that happens. So in any case, yeah, I would definitely say though, yeah, they're not concerned with you being the best academician in the world or even the best pilot in the world. They want you to be a generalist. So I would say definitely if you know, get a PhD and then become a military pilot or backseater or something like that, I think that would be a better approach. However, if your heart is in academia, obviously being in the military is not going to help you at all. And vice versa. If your goal is to be a military pilot and work your way up the ranks there, getting a PhD isn't going to help you. In fact, I remember in my interview group, or no, actually, yeah, I remember talking to one astronaut who said, you know, this whole astronaut thing, well, I'm glad to be here, it really killed my military career, because you're not working your way up the military ranks now. You're kind of in this outside, this little fringe thing. So you're not getting promoted to, lieutenant colonel, and, all those steps. You're never, probably not very many of them, unless you become an minister or something. Or I should say, a few people, have become like generals and such, but not that many. It's actually, they told me that the astronaut part is really not, for a frontline officer, is really not a good career path. So there's going to be compromises any way you look at it.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. There's a lot of into this, which we have another opportunity. So thank you, Professor, and continue from the theme from Jennifer. Thank you for carrying the flame, carrying the fire from Michael Collins, Neil Armstrong, and Buzz Aldrin.
Yes, that's what I do. I carry the flames.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. This is fantastic. We know much more questions, but just unfortunately,
Yeah. Well, you can always email me. I'm easy to find. Just Google my name and it comes up right away.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor. Yeah. Enjoy your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So sorry for this. Because our next speaker is actually she's joining us from Belgium, which is very late. And the Professor Ronney also has limited schedule for us. So our next speaker is Professor Dr. Sarah Batu. She's the Director Head Radiobiology Unit in Belgium Nuclear Research Center. He's an invited professor, Department of Astrophysics in KU Leuven, Belgium. He's a member of United Nations Scientific Committee on the effect of radiation, on the effect of atomic radiation, and the Secretary Treasurer of the European Radiation Research Society. So as you can see, the theme today, we learned from Jennifer about the story of Michael Collins. Then we move on to the person who carried the torch, the astronaut, Professor Ronney, and to the person who might actually also become astronaut, but she has been working on top research effort on how to protect astronauts. We'll try to give her more time to talk, but it's also very important for people to appreciate her effort and career. So I want to just mention that in addition to what we're saying here, he's actually awarded by the Royal Academy of Science and Arts in Belgium, the prestigious Western Prize of the Best Discovery in the field of natural sciences. And not only is in the High Commission, European Radiation Research Society, he is also a member of 2 advisory committees, European Space Agency, a Human Spaceflight Exploration Science Advisory Committee, and the European Space Science Committee. She has, the promoter for 5 postdocs and 15 PhD students, and co-author 140 international papers. And she received the award of the B-Space Personality of the Year. I think it's also recognized by various magazines as one of the women that make Belgium move. This is really a great honor for us as well. And he also appeared in a science fiction novel, To Play, Replay, of the Belgian author Peter Rakers about the preparation of martionauts. She plays her own character training and teaching the select crew before their space mission to Mars. So you can see that today's theme is back to the moon, onto Mars. And this is what I remembered. In 2020, she was awarded by the King and Queen of the Belgians the title of Woman of the Year for her strong and bright engagement towards society. For more than 20 years, her lab has been investigating the impact of ionizing radiation on health through the development of better radiotherapy treatment for cancer patients and the discovery of innovative biomarkers for personalized medicine of astronaut and the patient to ensure a better risk prediction and understanding of radiation susceptibility of each individual. She also currently studying the impact of cosmic radiation on European astronauts and the Russian cosmonauts to better understand how human physiology is affected by the space radiation and how to better prepare astronauts for longer mission to the moon and Mars. As human space exploration involves to ensure that astronauts remain safe, healthy, and productive for missions to the moon, to Mars, and beyond. Space radiation is recognized the showstopper It is thus imperative to develop innovative ways to better protect astronauts and increase their radiation resistance from space radiation. This to ensure the success of human exploration and protect astronauts' health. Professor Batu went to Antarctica to monitor health changes in this extreme environment with high degree of isolation and confinement. That parallels most closely long-duration human missions in space. So without further ado, let's welcome Professor Dr. Sarah Batu.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's really a great honor to be here today and to share a little bit of my research with you all. So I hope you can hear me well and that you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So let's move on. So I'm going to speak today about radiation protection of astronauts and human space exploration to the moon and to Mars. And after the two great talks that we just had earlier today, it's really an honor to continue about what we know exactly in terms of space health and the impact of space missions on astronauts' health. And of course, since 60 years of space missions, we have gathered a lot of data from the first orbit by Yuri Gagarin in 1961. And this year we are celebrating the 60 years of the first orbit around the Earth. Through the Skylab missions of about 10 days, the Mir missions, then right now we are mainly on the ISS, on the International Space Station, where missions are about 6 months to 1 year. But what is in front of us is really the preparation of the next steps, which are to go back to the moon, so to have boots on the moon again, and eventually to go back, to go to Mars. And we know all through these missions that space flights have an important impact on the human body, and we will see a little bit more about that in a few minutes. And we also know that consequences of space flights for health and behavior varies very much between astronauts. And we are also going to speak about personalized medicine for astronauts. And what we are preparing now is really future missions to the moon and to Mars, where the duration of the missions will be longer than what we are now encountering on board of the ISS, the International Space Station. And these long-term missions have got a name for a program, and it's the Space Getaway. And this Space Getaway is the first human spaceship to explore the solar system. It represents the most distant human space missions ever attempted. And it's really the testing ground for challenges of long duration human missions in deep space. And as mentioned by Ken, one of the main showstoppers is ionizing radiation, space radiation. So I would like to mention, in fact, the different stresses and the ranking of the stresses for long-term missions to space. And these different types of risks and stresses are ranked through this multilateral human research panel for exploration. So it's a kind of an international consensus of a human system risk posture. And when you look at that, you can, when you look at the table and the ratings of the risks for long-term human missions, you can clearly see that you have to focus then on the red colors. On the green colors and corresponds to risks that are low or of very low consequences, whilst the yellow colors have low to medium consequences. And the red colors in this table represent the risks with very high consequences, where you really need, you have a requirement to mitigate, so to find some countermeasures. And I would like to show and to explain basically that radiation, which is the very last line that you see on this table, is basically showing a red risk where we really need mitigation, so ways to overcome or to countermeasure this type of stress. So space radiation is the #1 risk to astronaut health beyond low Earth orbit. But first, what is low orbit? In low orbit and in different, which is a bit different than deep space. Low orbit, you mainly have electrons and protons, and so you have the Van Allen belts that also contain and include some trapped particles. And in beyond low Earth orbit, you have a combination of solar winds, which is including low energy electrons, protons, and alpha particles, which represent a continuous flux of irradiation, and which represent a low hazard, which is for us, specialists of radiation, not such a big deal or a big risk. However, solar particle events, which are high energy protons, which are usually an intermittent flux over 1 or 2 days of radiation, of very high level of radiation, and that are considered as very hazardous, are a matter of a high level of protection for astronauts and of concern, of course. And we will see in the next slides basically that inside the International Space Station, there are 3 parts of the station that are particularly protecting the astronauts, and where the astronauts can gather in time of solar particle events. One of the most important matters are the galactic cosmic rays that are composed of a majority of high energy protons, but also of alpha particles and heavy ions. And they represent really a continuous flux of radiation, and they are hazardous. And research is really needed in order to mitigate, to counteract the impact of galactic cosmic radiation. So not only this primary radiation that I just explained, the types of radiation I've just explained are important to mitigate, but also inside the spacecraft, you also have secondary radiation that can take place, and these are due to the interactions of primary radiation with nuclei of the spacecraft material or any type of molecules and atoms inside the human body. So you can really induce a myriad, a high quantity of secondary radiation, secondary particles that can induce even more damage inside the spacecraft, but also inside the human body. So as I mentioned, there are 3 parts inside the International Space Station that are particularly protecting the astronauts, and where the astronauts will shelter in case of solar particle events. And these are the service module, but also the water wall, so the water container, the water reserve, and also the sleep station inside the ISS. So water is H2O, so it contains hydrogen and oxygen, and a lot of hydrogen, and hydrogen being a very small atom is very good to stop most of the irradiation and the cosmic radiation. And in the sleep station, you have a lot of polyethylene, which is a molecule, a long polymer containing carbon as well as hydrogen. And these hydrogen atoms are also very good at stopping radiation. So for the moment, a lot of the research is performed on board of the International Space Station that you can see here. And this station is really critical to understand and to develop mitigating ways for future Mars mission, and to really understand human health as well as performance risks. And my institute, the Belgian Nuclear Research Center, SCK-CEN, performs a lot of research on board of the ISS. We have, for the moment, detectors that stay for about 6 months on board of the ISS and then come back, and we send continuously new detectors in order to characterize radiation inside and outside the International Space Station. We also monitor the health of the astronauts, also monitor their individual radiation sensitivity and radiation susceptibility. so on Russian cosmonauts and also on European astronauts. And we are also very much involved in what we call the MELISA program. And the MELISA program is the program for life support for future mission to Mars. We have sent 2 years ago the first bioreactor containing spirulina, which is a cyanobacteria that can produce oxygen and that can also produce some food. The dose of radiation on the ISS, on the International Space Station, is about 150 times higher than on the Earth. But the further we go, and as you can see here, for future mission to the moon, we will have then 300 to 400 times higher doses of radiation than on the Earth. And even further, going to deep space, to a deep space journey, or to Mars and back, would lead to a dose of radiation that can be about 1,000, 1,300 times higher than on Earth. A very important endeavor, which is an international endeavor, is to go back to the moon and to develop a kind of a moon village. The moon is very important because it's an archive of the Earth history. There is no magnetosphere and then no general atmosphere, so there is no real protection from harmful space radiation as we have, as we are protected on the Earth. So there is about more than 99% of cosmic radiation, which is stopped by our atmosphere on the Earth and by our magnetosphere. So without this atmosphere and magnetosphere on the moon, this radiation dose is much higher. And the moon is really the springboard and testing ground for future mission to Mars. So this international moon village is really an international endeavor in which humans and robots would work together and through operations and research and other projects on the lunar surface. The distance from the Earth to the moon is about 380,000 kilometers. What is very, very important to study and to develop is concerning the extravehicular activities. And the extravehicular activities are the activities that astronauts will perform on the surface of the moon when they are exploring the surface of the moon. And to compare during the Apollo program, about less than 20 extravehicular activities took place for the entire Apollo program. But for the future lunar programs, as they are envisaged, about 75 lunar extravehicular activities are envisaged per astronauts during their 6 months mission in an extreme and difficult environment. So there is really a need to develop these next generation of spacesuits that are resistant against abrasion of reactive chemical dust of the lunar regolith, for example, and lunar dust, resistant against UV, temperature, oxygen, which have a good weight, and also that are enabling astronauts to walk, that are flexible enough and elastic enough. So different materials are tested for the moment. And to go to Mars and for future missions to Mars, we encounter and we have calculated of about 1,000 more doses and higher doses than on the Earth. Mars is the most similar planet to the Earth. It will help to also understand whether life has existed elsewhere in the universe beyond the Earth. It's really a fundamental question for humanity. Mars was also once full of water and warmer, and it has a 1% of atmosphere, just also potentially a habitable environment. The distance from the Earth to Mars is about 225 million kilometers. Speaking now a little bit about towards precision medicine in astronauts, I would like to mention the different stresses astronauts are encountering. What we call the spaceflight stressors. First, we have what we can distinguish as the physical stresses. There was the spaceflight's physical stresses, which are microgravity, or the change of gravity fields. When you are on the moon, you have about a sixth of a gravitational force than what you have on the Earth, or a third of gravitational force on Mars. You have, of course, the radiation, cosmic radiation, as I mentioned earlier, but you also have on the surface of the moon, the lunar dust, and the lunar dust can be quite harmful for different parts of the human body, for the pulmonary system, for the skin, for the eyes, for example, but also for the immune system. And then you have microbes. Microbes, as we will see, the microbes that we have inside the body, so the microbiota, so the general microbiome that changes during the mission in space, and also the virulence of certain viruses inside our body that can really increase in space conditions. Then on top of the physical stresses, we also have the psychological stresses linked to the isolation, to a long duration isolation, to the confinement also, but also to the distance from Earth that can induce some psychological stress. And we also have the sleep disturbances. What we have gathered as information right now are mainly from short-term duration missions. As you can see in this graph, on the left-hand side, you see that most of the missions for which we have gathered data, human health data, and monitored human health, and are missions that are of 0 to 40 days of duration. And you can see that the longer the duration, the lower the amount of missions that have taken place. So in view of future missions to the moon and to Mars, only a small percentage of the missions that have been taking place now can give us some important information. So we still are needing quite a lot of more information, and there are still some kind of gaps of knowledge. What are the space health risks? First, there are some cardiovascular changes that are known, some body fluid shift that are also reported. We know that there is also some immune dysregulation that can happen in some astronauts. Dysregulation means that the immune system wakes up when it should not wake up, so start to react and maybe develop some type of allergies, whilst it should keep latent. And on the contrary, the immune system can also not activate, instead in places of activation when, for example, you have an infection that starts, the immune system should wake up and activate itself, and sometimes it doesn't happen. So you speak about immune dysregulation in these cases. We also know that viruses can become much more virulent in some cases in some space missions. Osteoporosis is accelerated in space, and we also have a muscular atrophy that can also lead to a decrease of muscle content and muscle strength. Skin is aging also faster in space. We also know that there are some space motion sickness, disorientation that can happen in some astronauts, disturbed sense of equilibrium, some brain changes, some cataract, higher risk of developing cataract for astronauts, food taste and food taste changes in space. The speed of the gut peristaltism, so the gut movement, can also vary. Microbiome changes and kidney stones can be induced with a higher risk. But most of these effects are reversible when coming back to Earth. We know also that there are gender differences. So between female and male astronauts, we also know that women, for example, have a greater loss of plasma volume in their blood. They also respond to physical stress. They also have a visual impairment, intracranial pressure syndrome that can affect 82% of men, so a higher level of men. Women report a higher incidence of in-flight space motion sickness, whilst more men experience space motion sickness symptoms upon return to Earth. Hearing thresholds decline with age, but much more rapidly in male than in female astronauts. And we know from extrapolated data from ground-based studies suggesting that women are more susceptible to radiation-induced cancer than male counterparts. And women also have more risks of developing urinary tract infection. When we look at the cancer risk variation expected between astronauts, we see that basically for ISS mission, we already see a wide variation of risks from 0.1 to about 2% of higher risks of cancer deaths. But the longer the mission and the further missions to the Mars, we see that the risks is much higher, going from 2% of higher risk to about 20% in some cases, with a wide variation between astronauts. There is also a very well-known variation of inter-individual radiation sensitivity between individuals. So in terms of sensitivity to radiation, all humans are created equal, but some humans are more equal than others, meaning that some humans will be much more radiation resistant than others. So you can see on this graph under that that you have a Gaussian curve with some astronauts and some individuals being very much radiation resistant, and some others that are very much more radiation sensitive than others. So there is really a need for precision medicine of astronauts, considering all these differences, and need for developing biomarkers of radiation sensitivity. And my lab is specialized, amongst others, in these type of aspects of research. We also see that radiation sensitivity varies with age and with gender. And you can see on the left-hand side a table as well as a graph that shows basically that with the age of less than 10 years, you have a factor of risk which is 3 times higher than in adults. So children, and certainly embryos, fetuses, are much more radiation sensitive than adults. But looking at the adult range of 30 years old, you see that when you are even older, your radiation resistance is higher. So the radiation risk decreases. So that can play a role also in the selection of future astronauts, where you can see that at the age of 50, you have half of the radiation risks than at the age of 30. And you also have on the right-hand side of this figure, you see that the radiation risk is higher in female astronauts than in male astronauts. Then to complete the picture, we know that radiation risks also varies depending on the organs and the parts of the body. So there are parts of the body that are quite sensitive to radiation. For example, the lens, the eye, the lungs, the breast, the gastrointestinal tract is also quite sensitive to radiation, but also the bone marrow and also the ovaries and the testicles are quite sensitive to radiation. So it's important also to develop the necessary means in order to protect these parts of the body the best we can. Space radiation is quite complex also to understand, but also complex in terms of the damage and the effects that it can induce. So it's also quite different than what we encounter on Earth and what we know on Earth and what we use in terms of radiation like X-rays or gamma rays for medical purposes, because it produces a densely ionizing track that can really damage in a very complex way the DNA, the genetic material, and that can induce some unique pathways, unique damage to biomolecules and cells and tissues. So there is really a need for more research in terms of understanding the impact on human health through the study of animal and cellular models. And also more studies are needed in order to understand whether there is a potential additive or synergetic impact of the combination of microgravity, radiation, lunar dust, for example, and other space stressors. Radiation can induce, and space radiation can induce higher risks of developing cancer. This is what we call radiation carcinogenesis. It can induce a higher risk of nervous system effects, of cardiovascular diseases or other degenerative tissue effects. And so it's important to characterize and know the risks of these potential effects that can be encountered. And this is why important also to develop personalized medicine for astronauts. So going from this current astronaut approach, which is the same basic countermeasures for all astronauts, and the same type of pharmaceutical molecules, for example, to personalized medicine approach for astronauts using countermeasures that can vary depending on the astronauts in order to develop a better and a more personalized care for the astronauts. And for this type of, for the personalized medicine, you need to have the best and the appropriate biomarkers. So in terms of radiation risks, we can classify biomarkers into different categories: biomarkers of exposure, biomarkers of susceptibility, of late effects, and persistent effects. I'm not going to go too much into details, but there are different categories of biomarkers: cytogenetic biomarkers, epigenomic modifications, DNA damage, cytokines, proteomics, transcriptional and translational approaches. And my institute is working on different types of biomarkers. There are also different ways to improve radiation resistance of astronauts by enhancing shielding, by selecting medically for the most radiation resistant astronauts, by testing different types of radioprotectors, by developing biomarkers, as I mentioned, by decreasing metabolism of astronauts and increasing radiation resistance, by also developing different types of biobanking or regenerative technologies in order to be able to regenerate tissues on board for long-term space missions. In my institute at the Belgian Nuclear Research Center, we are mainly working on three different aspects: on the dosimetry, characterizing the doses inside and outside the International Space Station, by developing life and food support system. This is work done by our microbiologists, and by studying the impact of space on health in terms of understanding the radiobiological aspects. Here are some pictures from some of our experiments. Here, the astronauts, Belgian astronauts Frank de Winne, attaching different types of dosimeters inside the Columbus modules in order to have the best mapping of the doses of radiation and the best characterization of radiation doses inside the modules, but also on the surface inside and outside here, outside the International Space Station, as you can see, with detectors placed outside the Columbus modules, but also measuring doses inside phantoms. And here is a beautiful phantom inside which we put different types of detectors, and that can give us an idea of the doses that would penetrate inside the body. We also study how to develop life support systems in order to produce food for long-term missions, in order to recycle urine, feces, organic matters. And this is what we call the European Space Agency MELISA program, which is composed of 4 types of compartments with bacteria and plants. and that allows to induce a waste liquefaction, a carbon transformation, a nitrogen transformation, and also a food and a water oxygen production for the astronauts in order to recycle up to 90% of the organic matter. So for that, we have, since the start of our space research in 2002, we have had about 15 flights, space flights, to the International Space Station. From very simple experiments performed on bacteria, on non-pathogenic bacteria, to very complex experiments and also experiments that are performed on the astronauts themselves. Here is an experiment that flew with the SpaceX 18, which is called the Biorock Experiment, which is the first lunar agriculture experiment in which basically we tested how bacteria can purify from lunar rocks, can purify different types of minerals that can be thereafter used for growing plants and that can be used as fertilizers. Other experiments that we are currently performing are the monitoring, for example, of the individual radiation sensitivity of astronauts, where we basically collect blood before astronauts are going to the ISS and when they come back. And we can learn from these sampling how much damage the cosmic radiation exposure has induced in the space, in the blood of the astronauts. We also study how much skin is impaired through a space mission. And why the skin? Because the skin is the largest organ of the body. It has vital functions like barrier function, immune defense and protection. And it also represents most frequent medical incidents that are reported by astronauts, small injuries or dryness or itching and delayed wound healing. So here is one of the experiments that we flew on skin cells. And you can see the ground control as well as the space samples on the right-hand side of this slide. And you can see that the amount of damage was much higher in the space samples. And we also could monitor what these skin cells could secrete and produce during their space flight. We also have run an experiment called spheroids, which is growing blood vessels in space, and that was flown with the SpaceX 8 in order to understand how blood vessels are growing in space and how sensitive these blood vessels are. So this was giving some very interesting information about the specific sensitivity of blood vessels. We also run through the use of a random positioning machine. This is the machine that you see on the top right of this picture, different types of cell cultures that we place in these machines. And here, for example, some brain cultures, some neuron cultures, where you can understand then on Earth and understand the synergic impact of radiation as well as microgravity, because random positioning machine is an excellent simulator of microgravity. And you can thereafter really understand how this combination of radiation and microgravity simulations affect the neuronal network and the connections between the brain cells. We're also very and particularly interested in the microbiome and how the microbiome, so the gut bacteria, about 400-500 grams of gut microbiome populations are basically influencing astronauts' health. And it's very important to understand the composition of this microbiome and how the space environment influence this microbiome. And we know that basically we have a decrease of diversity of this microbiome along the space flight, and the longer the duration, the higher this effect is. We also flew earlier this year and also last year some extreme organisms that are called rotifers. And the rotifers have spent a few weeks on board of the ISS, and we studied basically what makes these organisms so resistant towards radiation. We flew some desiccated form that you can see on the right-hand side, desiccated form of rotifers, as well as hydrated forms of rotifers. And we are now busy understanding and analyzing the data. As mentioned also during the introduction by Ken, I was also very honored to go myself to Antarctica, to the Belgian Princess Elizabeth station that you can see on this picture. It's the only zero emission station in Antarctica. And I could run there for a certain number of weeks, some immune studies, also some heart cardiovascular studies on the volunteers in the station. And we also run quite a lot of space analog studies using bed rest, for example, the bed rest models in Germany, where we participate and collect quite a lot of data and samples from the volunteers that are in this simulated microgravity situation. We also have a very strong program in Europe called the IBER program, which is the investigations of biological effects of radiation, where we can run different types of experiments. And we run already twice this year some very interesting and long radiation exposure with heavy ion at the Ganil, which is the big accelerators in France, in Caen, and also at the GSI. And some of my students went also twice this year to the Analog Astronaut Training Center in Poland, where they could run an isolation and a confinement study for a week. And we are preparing now our next round of students to go to this Analog Astronaut Training Center next month in August. So in conclusion, it's very important to continue to better personalize the risk assessment of astronauts for deep space exploration, and important to understand the combination of the effects of spaceflight stressors, and to understand the impact at the cellular level, at the whole body level, and to develop also a better countermeasure for future deep space mission. And let's not forget that space radiation benefits patients on Earth, and amongst others, by better understanding and better develop cancer treatment, which is a #1 killer on Earth. So with that, I would like to just invite you, if you are interested by this type of topics, to listen to the TEDx conference on this matter that I gave not such a long time ago. And if you are interested also to read this sci-fi novel, To Reply, No Reply, which is a trilogy, so 3 books as a mission to Mars of a certain number of astronauts and martionauts, and in which I was very happy to guide the author and to play also my own character and training the astronauts before they were going to Mars. If you are interested by the scientific aspects of this presentation, I just would like to invite you to read some of the references and some of the publications that we have published recently, and also to contact me if you are interested. And recently, also the European Space Agency has launched a recruitment and a selection campaign of astronauts in which I participated, and I hope also to be selected in the future for becoming an ESA astronaut. And with that, I would like to finish my presentation and thank quite a numerous number of people and institutions that are present here on these slides. And also thank you for your attention. And if you need more information or would like to come to the SCKCN for an internship or for some stage, just don't hesitate to contact me. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm really open for some questions.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you, Professor Batu. This is amazing. And this is so important for people going to space. People didn't realize. They think that all the glory of the astronaut thing, but it's people like you who protect astronauts. This is very important for sustainable human presence in space. So it's really amazing. So we'll post your video, the TEDx video, and the sci-fi with your as the actress for yourself.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're a movie star. You're a movie star. You should come here to Los Angeles. We go to the China Theater. We should put your hands on the floor. Put a mark.
Thank you very much.
We'll post this and along with there's your reference over there. So I think Bob has a question. Bob, go ahead.
Yes, lava tubes are located on the moon, and I was wondering if your research there would indicate that we would need to build structures on the moon and eventually Mars, but try to site them into already existing caves, or in this case, lava tubes, as a protection against radiation.
It's an excellent question. Yes, lava tubes could be potentially extremely interesting. I think we are going towards a type of habitat which could be a combination of maybe partly potentially in this type of environment of lava tubes, but also or protected with a thick layer of regolith. That could be also potentially interesting, but I think we are going forward to a type of covered habitat to the moon and to Mars in order to protect against space radiation. But lava tubes are extremely interesting. Quite a lot of research is being performed also on Earth in terms of isolation, but also to see whether these tubes could be a good protection, radiation protection, but also in terms of confinement. So there are quite a lot of studies performed that are quite useful also to give some information, scientific information on Earth, on what to expect and how to build them better inside the lava, how to build the best habitat inside the lava tube, but fascinating type of research as well.
How many meters of lunar soil regolith would be needed to have an adequate amount of shielding if you were going to cover over a surface structure?
You would need a few meters of protection. At least in terms of, you could use water, but the problem is really to get water and to have enough water. But with 10-11 meters of water, you would have a very good protection. But practically, this is not possible at the day of today. But I would say a few meters of regolith would be enough to protect extremely well. So in that maybe lava tube could be quite interesting because you would have already the protection from the surface, and you would have then to display and to deploy a smaller habitat inside already something that is existing. So you would not need to build too much. So I think this is would be the advantage of a lava tube.
Okay, so next, Tom. Tom, go ahead.
Yes, one of your slides I thought said that there was more neutron exposure on the moon than in low Earth orbits. Why would that be?
No, if you're interested in the composition, I think it was just as an information that I gave. So I just wanted to focus in low Earth orbit. You mainly have electrons and protons, and that's why I mentioned the Van Allen belts and the trapped particles in low Earth orbit. And for the beyond low Earth orbit, I mentioned mainly the electrons, the protons, and the alpha particles in the solar wind, and also the high energy protons. 90% in the galactic cosmic radiation and about 10% of alpha particles, and also heavy ions. I mentioned also the solar particle events and the protons, the high energy protons. But where I mentioned some neutrons was more in the secondary radiation. It's really inside the spacecraft that can be generated. They can be generated from the first irradiation, so from the interaction from the primary radiation with the nuclei of the spacecraft material and inside the human body. So that's where I mentioned some neutrons inside. Yes, indeed.
Excellent. I think Sina has a question. Sina, go ahead.
Yeah, so thanks for the wonderful talk, Dr. Baatout. So I was wondering, since we know that this space and the radiation in the space has a huge impact on any human body fluid shift, right? So I was wondering, is there any research done towards radiation impact on the let's say central nervous system, more specifically on the blood-brain barrier?
Very interesting question as well. So we know that the brain is a particularly plastic organ, meaning that if you train the brain, you can manage to build, to develop new type of connections.
Right,
So
neuroplasticity.
Yeah, the neuroplasticity. That's what I mean. Exactly, neuroplasticity. So what we have seen is that basically when you have a culture of neuronal cells and that you place them in simulated microgravity, it takes a few hours. And thanks to this neuroplasticity, it takes a few hours. But after a few hours, the neurons start to manage and to develop the same type of connection or to develop new connections in the space environment. So it's quite positive and quite interesting to see that even if in another environment and is in a stressful environment with the different space stressors, that basically the brain manages to adapt. But there are some effects and quite some studies are performed in terms of the proportion of the gray matter versus the white matters. And there they seem to be some impact, long-term impacts that don't seem to be that reversible. So, but that still needs some confirmation. But it seems that the gray matter decreases and shrink a little bit in space. So the longer the duration of the mission, the higher potentially, the higher the risk for the gray matter inside the brain. Right. For the blood-brain barrier, which is a very specific and very protective for the brain, not so many studies have been performed so far. So I think we still need more research on that particular topic in order to understand basically if the blood-brain barrier would keep its characteristics or would be as tight or could leak in a certain way, so could maybe have some impact on in terms of protecting for the immune system or less protecting. So quite a lot of studies still need to be performed in order to specifically address this topic of the blood-brain barrier. Is still incomplete for the moment, as far as I know.
And the last of the gray matter is due to the space harsh radiation, or it's due to the loss of gravity?
It's a combination, but it's most probably I would say it's more due to the microgravity, more than radiation. As far as I can make out, I think it's going to be so. It could mean that if you have a moon village, a moon habitat with a 6 of the gravitational force present, maybe we might not have such an impact on the gray matter for the moon habitat or for a habitat on Mars. So it could be that it might less be of a problem, but on the ISS, so when you have long-term missions in space or in deep space, that can be an important aspects of research to concern and an important risk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, hello everyone. Obviously, you can see there are a lot of things in this, and this is just a showcase to show Professor can tell us about those and the importance of her research. So this is just a beginning. We'll continue to work with her, and this is very important topic for aerospace community and the AIAA as well. As you can see, this shielding actually affect the design of spacecraft, habitat, spacesuit. So it's a lot of things is interrelated. So obviously it's not going to be just covered by a short talk today, but this is a beginning, you know, with more to come. So really appreciate, and Professor over there in Belgium is quite late. So really appreciate her staying late with us. So this is fantastic, really amazing. Thank you, Professor, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
our great pleasure and honor, appreciate it.
For me too. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you. So you can see today we start from Michael Collins and then carrying the fire flame to astronaut Professor Ronney and how to protect astronaut. You know, with Sarah, with Professor Batu. Now the thing we're going to Mars. So this is so exciting perseverance. And then today we have the man who is behind the scene, who is driving the Perseverance rover, who's the guy who is behind all those exciting motion and development, discovery, those things. So today we are so honored to have Dr. Jeng Yen from JPL. He's a group supervisor of robotics in Jet Propulsion Laboratory for Caltech. He's a PhD in applied mathematics and a Master of Mechanical Engineering from the University of Iowa. After earned his Bachelor of Science in Mathematics from the National Tsinghua University in Taiwan. In 1994, he joined Army High Performance Computing Center at University of Michigan. Currently, he supervises the Robot Interfaces and Visualization Group of Mobility and the Robotic Systems Section at NASA JPL. Since joining JPL in 1998, he has been working in research and development of robotic application for NASA's Mars mission. His technical expertise in design, development, and operation of space robots contribute to the success of many missions. He has led the development of robot sequencing and visualization program, RSVP, for control and operation of Mars rovers and landers. Dr. Yen has assumed the rover driver role of 2004 Spirits and Opportunity rovers and the 2012 Curiosity rover. Through operating the rovers, he has witnessed and contributed greatly to the scientific discovery of the geological history of Mars in the last 2 decades. He is currently a rover planner operating the Perseverance in the Jezero crater, Mars, where scientists is searching for the evidence of Martian life. Dr. Yen has also broad and deep involvement with many community groups. He's an active mentor and the founder of the San Marino High School Robotics Club, where he has directed the titanium robotics team entering first robotic competition annually. He served in the San Marino Unified School District on the governing board from 2006 to 2013, where he has devoted to the betterment of K-12 education and the community's services. And below you can see a chronology of his great career and development. You know, you can see yourself. And I have seen him in a major newspaper in Taiwan and in California, United States. He was praised by the Taiwan President Tsai as a, you know, it's a very, you know, leading frontier person, you know, Taiwanese American. That's a really great honor for us to have Dr. Yen speak to us. He is the guy behind all the things you see on TV. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Jeng Yen.
Thank you, Ken, for the kind words. Let me share my screen.
Go ahead.
Can you see the screen?
Yes.
All right. So first of all, I was very impressed with the previous talker, the speakers, Professor Ronney and Professor Sarah Baatout. the subject we're dealing with in JPL is far more or less complicated than a human body. So we're roboticists. We only deal with the motors and some instruments compared to human body. It's a very small case, I would say. Nevertheless, in the last 20 years on Mars, we have 3 rovers or 3 major rovers missions. I would like to show you today in my talk is how we actually operate rover on Mars. So first of all, I know in the media, it does cover a lot of current event with Perseverance and Ingenuity, which is the Mars helicopter. But I would first give an introduction of why we choose Jezero crater as a landing place. So I'll show a short video clip to remind to start the conversation here. This is by Ken Foley as our science lead on the mission. So I hope you can hear his talk.
This flyover was produced from NASA images taken from orbit. The blue circle indicates the area the rover will likely land. The arcing hills in the center, about 1,600 feet high, and are the rim of Jezero crater. The goal of Mars 2020 is to learn whether life ever existed on Mars. It's too cold and dry for life to exist on the Martian surface today. But after Jezero crater formed billions of years ago, water filled it to form a deep lake, about the same size as Lake Tahoe. Eventually, as Mars climate changed, Lake Jezero dried up and surface water disappeared from the planet. An ancient lake is a fantastic place to pursue our goal of looking for possible Martian life. On Earth, lakes are filled with living creatures. Evidence of that life is often preserved in the mud and sand deposited on the bottom of the lake. So we use the rover's instruments to explore the rocks of the ancient lake bed. Here we can see evidence of the former lake. The canyon cutting through the crater rim was carved by a river. As the water entered the lake, it slowed and dropped the sand and mud it was carrying to form the fan-shaped delta. The white line is a path the rover might follow in its first 2 years, called the prime mission. During this period, we use the rover science instruments to analyze the lake sediments. After we explore the delta, we hope to investigate the shoreline of the former lake. To get there, we have to traverse around a sea of modern sand dunes. From this perspective, you can see former shorelines curving around a headland. We can picture waves in Lake Jezero beating on a sandy beach. And finally, we will press on to the crater rim. Jezero crater formed when a large object collided with Mars, excavating rocks from deep in the Martian crust, exposing them in the rim for us to study. These rocks would have been hot shortly after the impact and may have hosted hot springs. Deposits from these springs would be another target in our search for possible ancient life on Mars.
Okay, so the reason we find Jezero is a good place to find ancient sign of Martian life is because is from at least from the orbital image, it looks like a dry lake bed, and the lake size is about Lake Tahoe and have a sort of a river coming into the lake, and also have a hot spring. So those features had in our past missions often find some very interesting geology and elements that could support life. So how Perseverance land on Mars? I think hopefully you guys saw some of the video coming back from the landing on February 18th. We called it 7 minutes of terror. In fact, that's that's sort of a description of you spend, a decade design and figured out how each step, how do we land a one-ton vehicle on Mars, and then you succeed, right? So all those join is coming through. But basically, we have totally automate the sequence from entry, descent, and landing. These steps are being tested and actually applied in Curiosity rover. I don't think there would be there's any differences on this mission, but the major differences is in all these stages. We have camera. It's sort of like a GoPro on the descent stage on the rover, point up and point down, so we can have all the footage to trace back to how this happened exactly. You can find this online. It's pretty exciting to me, at least, and everybody in JPL was really thrilled. All these images come back, and then we still carrying out a lot of analysis. But basically, we did the precision landing. The landing spot is within 10-meter radius of the of what we plan. So this is a pretty I would say extreme accuracy on the landing a spacecraft to a point from 3 million miles away. You land within 10-meter radius. That's pretty amazing. Here's the spacecraft after the landing. We did a high res, and you can see the parachute, back shield, descent stage, and the heat shield are all dropped in the area where we land, and the rover itself is also being detected. So let me change the topic now to a surface mission. So that's ours, right? So in the first 6-8 years, we have a lot of engineering doing a lot of V&V, and then you have 7 minutes. Then you have 8 months of cruise to go from Earth to Mars, and then you have 7 minutes of terror to entry, descent, landing, and land the rover. What's next? Is going to be many days or sols of work on the surface of Mars, and so how do we do that? The surface of Mars is the reason I put this picture there is somehow like play a video game. I think if you think the whole thing, but let me show you exactly. It's not exactly what we do here, but as a reminiscent of that. So this is how we command. When we do command a rover, we basically have I would say a gaming environment to create a virtual environment so that operator like myself, we're trying to operate an arm or drive a rover, have this called virtual presence. I think this is also a concept of for astronaut, for instance, they want to do remote control, say, on a spacecraft, and then control a robot or some instrument pointing and stuff in a different place. So you need to know what is your local environment look like, and use that information. We create this command sequencing, and then send those sequence to Mars. So our operation mode is like that, but because the Mars is too far away, it's about one command sequence send from Earth to Mars probably take 10 to 15 minutes, and then you get back. If you can get the signal back, it will be another, say, 10, 15 minutes. So if we joystick the robot, then it will take probably one move, and then you go out, get coffee for 20 minutes and come back then and see the result. That's just not operable, right? In that kind of thing. So what we did is we create this virtual environment, and we create we call sequence, command sequencing. And this sequence is a long, you can see, you can think of it as a computer code to tell the robot do 1 day or 2 days of work. And then we send this command to Mars, and rover will do the work and so on. After the day's end, it will send back its information. So what sort of information we need? First, imagery, right? So this is for instance, when we just land, you can see this area. This is 360 on our landing area, and you can see that the white the surface have a different color. That actually is the landing rocket. Cheered up a lot of surface material, and we took, this is about 30 plus 40 some pictures, right? So based on these pictures, we create we'll understand what's the local environment look like around the rover. And then use these in the picture, we can create this 3D surface around the rover. How each of these little images, we call the stereo pair of image, meaning we take two camera point to the same place. So each of little image I show, actually you have two cameras, two images. These two images, then you use the triangulation, you can create the 3D surface from those images, and then you stitch everything together. That gives you the local geometry of the surface. And then the image also have these textures. These textures give not only us, but also scientists to understand what sort of material you have. And based on this information, we can command the rover from point A to point B, right? So you can see that the bluish rover is our starting point. And then if you want to go there, because science teams say, hey, that rock looks shiny and look different, can we go there? And so my job to drive the rover is to write the command sequence and somehow to get to that point. We also we call it the simulation. If you look at this picture, this is the tool we use. We developed how do we control the robot or to operate the robot. If you look carefully, there's a golden line. So these two, if you follow my cursor there, is what we plan the rover go, the track. So behind the scene, when we did the commands or command sequence, we also use simulation to validate all those commands before we set it up to Mars. So these simulation is pretty involved, meaning it has to reflect the reality, right? So once we validate it through the simulation, then we say this is good enough, and we can set it up. You know, I often talk to people, ask me, say, you know, this on Mars, you don't have pedestrian and all this, you know, moving object, basically. So since the command in the rover is reminiscent to, say, driverless car, so it should be fairly straightforward. Turns out it's not that straightforward, because you have some, you know, sandy area or some rock can hurt the wheel. When we place the arm, there are some obstacle which can, or rock. If you push the instrument too hard, you can harm the instrument and so on. So there's a lot of different things can happen. So validation with simulation is a very important part of our operation. The rest, I will just show you some of the work we did since landing in a chronological order. So after we land, the first, the machine, the robot took 8 months of flying in a very cold and space environment. So first we do is to check all the motor. This is the wiggle the wheel. Then we do our first drive in South 14. It's really just a short turnaround and then phase to the area we want to go. On the upper side, this is the rover's navigation camera to document the drive. On the bottom right is the actual simulation to pretend the drive. So one thing I like to mention for the difference for this mission is that we have another passenger. This is the helicopter, Mars Heli Ingenuity. So what we do first in these first 2 months on Mars is to find a place that we can, you know, drop the Mars helicopter and make it and carry out its mission. Another thing is we does have a laser called chemical induced laser on board, made by French science team. So we do, and on that instrument we also carried a microphone. So we does have, you know, if you look at the image, you can see a little dot. So before and after, we also have record the song from Mars. All right, that was pretty cool, because in the previous mission we don't have any microphone and we didn't hear any song back for many years, and then that was the first song we just like, oh, really great. We does also have a entry, descent, landing. We does have a camera, a microphone on the descent stage or rover, during the descent, we does sort of record some of the event and so on, but the voices doesn't really kind of come out right. I think it's due to the nature of the microphone, because it has to do with the pressure outside and inside and so on. But that was the first time we hear the laser, so that was pretty cool. And the following saw, we also does examine the arm. So this is a pretty important instrument. So because this mission, the main goal is to sample from Mars regoliths and rocks for possible, sign of past life or current life even. So we examine all these instruments on the turret of the arm. As I said, we have, so this mission, the robot, the very important thing is to carry out the sampling. And all the sample going to be sealed in a tube in a later time to bring back to Earth. So what we did is, under the belly of Perseverance, we have this little, I would say a small sort of carousel of the tube, and then a little 3 degree of freedom arm to be able to take the tube and seal it, and take get the sample from the arm, and then take image and seal it. So itself is a small robot under the belly. So that is the belly thing. We call it the ACA. It's the assembly of sample acquisition system. So this is the day we dropped the cover for that underneath small robot, so that when we get the tube and to the later day to a fixed place, we can drop the sample to the ground, and the next mission will pick it up and package it and send it back to Earth. As you can see, that's we examined this little robot in there. We have the total number of tubes is 43, I think. Then this is the big, like three DOF arm, little arm there, and this picture is took by the handheld camera on the arm. So this is how we plan to do that, and then examine that area. This is from the again from the handheld camera to see before and after. And then we also dropped a cover of the helicopter. You can see the passenger of this rover is Ingenuity, the Mars helicopter, is carried underneath the belly. Then we drop the cover, and then it will take about 5 days to release the helicopter. So we, it took like 5 saw to let the camera cut off the from the belly, and then rover drove off and take the picture there. After drop off, and the helicopter is the darling of the media now. It has 2 cameras. One is for navigation. One is for it's a color camera. So this is from the helicopter camera to come up with this image, and this is from the rover camera to show it. So after that, we drove away about 100 meters before the camera can actually fly. And here I like to demonstrate how we do a complete drive to a place that we can do science. Right. So helicopter, if you look at that, the helicopter is about 100 meters away. While we're waiting it to fly, we also drove to the rover to this area, which we deployed the arm to look at the rock and also test out lots of the arm instrument that later we can use it. So this is the drive. We first back out and then we take image. So those images can send back to Earth later to have the detailed information on that under the belly of the rover. And then we approach to the final destination. The green dot here is the target area that we really want to do science. Okay, and at the meantime, we point to the mass camera on top of the rover to point to the helicopter, so helicopter flight can be recorded. This is how we recorded the helicopter fly. So this is our first fly, which has a big splash on the news cycle, because this is a first human-made object that flew on a different planet or different world outside Earth. So you can see this fly is very easy, just like go up and down. On the top and of the right side is the navigation camera on the helicopter. And the left-hand side is from the rover camera mass cam to see the fly there. Anyway, that day was very excited for JPL. Lots of people put a lot of effort. This is 6 years in the making. We push it through. So this is remind me of my first time I saw the Pathfinder, the little robot rover called Surgeon. That was 20 years ago, 1997, July 4th. We landed this precursor, just like the Mars helicopter today. It's a we call it tech demonstration. It's a it just make me feel it's so cool. I need to be in this place doing this project. So hopefully, send some people sitting in the corner of the some state look at this picture, say, yeah, this is give the aerospace a lot of new blood, attract a lot of people. So what's next? Okay, then we have the second fly. Then we have the differences on the second fly is we're trying to point a microphone to record the song of the second fly. Actually, we get some sound, but it's a not very clear. So because we're about 100 meters away, actually 70 meters away, but we do have some good image I don't know. The I know you can hear, but this is a little noise. It's just like the engines on Earth. So the difference is for the second fly is gets higher, it's about 10 meters higher, and so on. Then we have, the whole plan for the tech demonstration. Tech is 5 flights. So the 5th flight is what I indicate here. The green dot on the right-hand side picture is the place we call the airstrip, right? So the square there is anywhere there we want the helicopter to fly, come back. The 5th flight is actually from the green dot to the grayish line as my mouse going there. This is about 100-meter flight there. The 4th flight went there and come back. The 5th flight is actually go out to just land there. Now, so we did, in the meantime, as I show in the first picture, we drove to a science target. So what we do in the science target, we placed the arm instrument on top of it. So we have a handheld camera called Watson. We have another camera called Sherlock. That's use the UV light to shine on the rock regulars, and then to detect some of the chemical in the or mineral in the rock. We can place this handheld camera very close to the target. So so all this are work which is pretty critical, because to detect life, you need to have all those science observation and then being able to guess, oh, this could be the best what we have, right? We also shoot the camera to the helicopter, you can see. So this just show you a lot of time rover has to stay there to do science. To do science, in fact, is very not glamorous as flying hundreds of meters and one shot or something. It just take a time to observe a target and get as much data as possible and get it back so the science team can make determination of this is a good place we can do sampling or not. Right, this involves a lot of high level, very accurate placement of the arm instrument and so on. So where we are. So I like to show this picture is because when we after the helicopter land a different place, and NASA provide us additional money to extend the mission instead of just 70 sol of fly. They give us saying this is a fantastic instrument. I mean, the helicopter ingenuity. So we can keep doing the science mission with this instrument. So we just learn how to do it. So it's a sort of like Batman and Robin. How do we, collaborate? How do we do to solve the mystery of whether there's life on Mars? This picture particularly, you can see that the rover drove in this way, but on this corner right there, I circulate that. That's the helicopter. If you blow it up in this picture, also in a different angle, you can see also it sits right there. All right, this is another sort of surprised in the Jezero. In Jezero rover crater, turns out there's a lot of this dust devil. Even in the top picture, you can see there's a, like, I don't know, if you go to the Death Valley, you see this dust devil. It's more like these small ones. But we also see this is like huge dust devil event. The dust devil event wouldn't hurt the rover, but we don't want to fly helicopter during this event because these cause sort of a very uncertain density on the atmosphere. So flying become kind of dangerous. So right now, as we speak, we gradually get the rover be more capable. We have this we call it AutoNav driving. We have an onboard sort of documentation of how AutoNav means the rover will make its own decision to avoid obstacle. In this picture, you can see those rocks, which is not quite optical, but it can haul the drive, right? In this case, we actually got hauled. And then the second saw, we have to, if you look at the down in the this picture, so because we kind of reached the tilt limit we set, and then we have to back out. And today we have the evidence we can fully sort of utilize the onboard autonomy for driving. We call AutoNav. So basically, as a rover driver, we first identify some area that I definitely don't want the rover to go. This is for efficiency and safety of the rover. But then the rover is going to make its own decision to how to get there. So this is the onboard data to display in our ground tool to see how rover does things. All right, finally, where's the ingenuity team? We have a 9 fly to date. The last fly is, if you look at this picture, there is the green line. It just flew across the area, and all the circle there, it means all the image it took. And we can use those images to correlate the high-res image. And this is very important path. You can see this Y line there is actually the rover position right now. The blue dot there, KM dot there is the rover location. The rover have to take, the safety route to there because all these area sand dunes is pretty hard to traverse, and the rover can get stuck in there. So we find a way to use the Batman and Robin combination to utilize our the helicopter to fly ahead of us and then make decision of is this area are interesting to science team because they have color image and more close imagery, right? And then we can command the rover then follow up with that. Okay, that's my presentation. I think since we were kind of late, but I'll just open to any question. Stop this.
Yeah, this is wonderful. So I think Mike has a question. Mike, go ahead.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Speak louder, Mike.
Hi, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay, let me try to speak up so everyone can hear me. When you're talking about the driving the rover on Mars and simulating it beforehand to make sure that you get where you need to go, and you don't want to wait. You mentioned how you don't want to wait, you know, drive it a little bit and then go get some coffee and come back. You want to plan it all out ahead of time. So what I'm wondering is, that sounds incredibly risky. The first thing I was thinking when I heard you say that is, it seemed incredibly risky every time you do that. I was wondering if there might have been a time you can think of where you did a planned maneuver, and then when you got the results, it was totally different than what you had expected.
Yes, there. Okay, first to answer your question, to joystick a rover from Earth is just impossible, right? I would say, you know, instant feedback, it would take half an hour, just round trip, to get the feedback. So the reason we not doing that is because the limitation, because the distance from Earth to Mars is just too long, too far away. Second question, do we have, like, you know, unexpected result? I would say yes, a lot, especially in the early days. We have sometimes I remember one time we create a sequence, we want to go straight forward. Turns out the rover just like start with backing up. But I mean, certainly our job is to keep the vehicle safe, right? So after that, we did a lot of more to understand what the vehicle thinking, since we give the more autonomy, onboard autonomy to the rover. So our technique currently is to download the brain of the rover, and every time we send out a long sequence or a source of work, we just ran through the simulation, as I mentioned, validation and verification of that sequence, which is a very, very important step for us. After all, this vehicle costs what, $2.5 billion, right? So yeah, thank you for your question.
Can I ask another question real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned the audio, how it was really cool to get audio from Mars, and it made me think, has there ever been like an experiment on Mars where you play like a song from a speaker, an analog song, and then retrieve it from a microphone at another location to see how music or sound travels and reacts on Mars?
Well, we do have a recording of the helicopter fly. Is that I think qualified for playing something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did hear that. So the microphone does record those. We also record a lot of like wind blowing stuff. And when we drive, actually the recording will help us, because the wheel contact with the terrain. Say you drive over a big rock and then all of a sudden you slipped. So you will see that you were heard from the recording, right? So those kind of things is still sort of under the investigation, how do we use this instrument to help us to better understand how do we operate this vehicle.
And can I ask one more thing real quick, Ken?
Okay.
Okay, real quick. You talked a lot about ingenuity. And I was wondering, are there any plans in the future from transitioning from driving rovers to flying helicopters? And are there any skills needed to fly helicopters on Mars that you don't have for rovers?
Yeah, I think we need to, since we demoed the Ingenuity, already demoed, fly on Mars is a possibility. Unfortunately, the payload on the Ingenuity, since this is tech demo, doesn't really carry any instrument except a color camera, and it's on black and white navigation camera.
Are you going to be flying any helicopters on Mars?
Am I? We have a specialized people on doing that. It's pretty much like the operate the robot, but we just need to coordinate with them. Actually, part of our team is we call the HIE helicopter interface engineer that knows how to fly, and plan that and coordinate with all the team member to do that. So far, I think NASA is indicate they want to do a mission if they can design a science mission, a science payload for helicopter. They were willing to pony up the money doing that. I don't know the detail at this point, but it's a very exciting platform to do science on Mars.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Ken. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. So Dr. Charles Yi, go ahead.
Yes. Hi, Dr. Yen. Nice to meet you. I had worked at JPL for 14 years, from 82 to 96. At that time, Mars rover development was still in very primitive stage. Now not only become reality, achievement is amazing. Great job.
Wow.
Yeah, I understand. Based on the photos taken in the past from the top, you can generate 3D contours of a Mars surface. So your simulation is actually a 3D animation of the rover moving on the surface, right? And you also mentioned that in the real mission, it may not exactly duplicate your simulation. Do you guys understand why? For example, you want to maneuver through the rocks, but actually you kind of like hitting the rock, right? So why is that? You have the camera on while the Mars is moving, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. So all these 3D surface information is geometry, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things, if we want to predict how the wheel and the terrain interact, you need to know the what sort of material underneath the wheel, and that simulation or that actual interactively, predict how the slip or the soil mechanics will work is actually pretty involved. We don't you go to the place, right?
That's not in the simulation. I see. Okay.
That's in the simulation, but in a very coarse way to predict that.
I see.
We can only use the texture to predict that. Yeah.
I see. There's no way to improve it based on the experience.
You could improve it, but to the point that you You know, if you go to hiking, right? Like humans, you can use your eye to and your experiences to say, hey, this area is pretty slippery, and you have a stick. You can try, right? But that's about it. I know what you sort of getting to. So this is the reason I mentioned about use the microphone to record, right? So there's some proposal from MIT about soil mechanics and mechanical engineering department. They, in the early days, they can use the recording sound in the wheel to decide how much slip it actually happened. But it's never been validated to the point that we willing to use that technique.
I see. So we had several Mars rover mission in the past, right? So did you see the improvement over so many missions?
Oh yeah, even though from the outside you look at it's the same, it's also 6 wheels and have an arm and so on. But internally we did a lot of improvement in the software side and the hardware side, right? We learned from the past experiences.
I see.
What can fail, right? I give you example like Curiosity, the wheel design that lots of small pointing rock can poke it through. So you get the wheel broken. There's a lot of cracks in the wheel. So this time we designed the wheel in a different way, right? As with the similar weights, but then it's much more durable. At least from now, I mean, what we see is much better.
Another question is, does JPL has any plan for the next step of Mars mission?
Yeah, the next big mission is to take those sample back. Right?
Oh, that's a big breakthrough, right? Okay, great. Thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
May I bring up a question too, Ken?
Sina, wait a second, because Professor Baatout is Batu very late over there.
Oh, okay.
So she get. And by the way, Dr. Charles E is very highly respected in AIAA, and we just have an article about him in the June newsletter. We recognize him for 40 years of membership. He has a great accomplishment in aerospace. So please take a look at newsletter. It's our great pleasure and honor Dr. E joined us today. Yes, Professor Batu, go ahead. Okay,
thank you very much. Absolutely great talk, fantastic achievement, and really wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. I enjoyed it very much. I wanted to ask you what is the mean speed of Perseverance, and has there any parts that broke down until now?
Okay, yeah. I mean, to answer your first question, cross fingers. We haven't had any major fall at this point, but because the complication of the flights, the software control this robots, all the aspect of the robot. So we still rolled out our capability one step at a time, but the main schedule is the next month. We're going to do our first sampling. So that's the whole mission, right? So our mission success criterion is to get 20 sample for 1 Martian year. So that part is still coming. But to answer your first question, the top speed, I know you probably read a lot of it's a turtle, right? But I in my presentation, I show you the AutoNav. In the past mission, the autonav is very slow and generate a lot of data. But this time, the autonav it can go about top speed probably is the 5 meter per minute. That's actually pretty good speed.
Wow.
All right, so we've been doing this like 120 meter drive in one like 2 hours of drive with the autonav. That's pretty big.
Yeah, it's really impressive.
Yeah.
And what is the next? Yeah.
I also very enjoy your talk. I think you know the difference is that you deal with a much complicated system, the human body.
It's different than the equipment, but it's as complex, I think. But and what is the next goal now for Perseverance? Is to continue the sampling. And for Ingenuity, what is the next goal now?
So our next goal, as I mentioned, just like get first sample tube to fill, and then to be able to exercise the whole sealing and make the sample, secure the sample. So we are doing this we call the green zone campaign. So near the helicopter fly, if you look at it, that area, there's a group of the bare rocks, if you want, from the imagery. It seems to me the science team very interested. I don't know the detail, but I can guess that could reminiscent to some sort of a ancient hot spring or some sort of a sedimentary layer. So our green zone campaign is to examine that area, especially for that pile of rocks. And also there's a mount about 20-30 feet high. So they're coming up with some sort of a theory about that could be some sedimentary area or something, which it could be just the helicopter can get it, but the rover cannot get it, right? So we're trying to find some scientific valuable targets, but also explore the possible use these new platform that the helicopter to give us more information.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, Sina, go ahead. And next will be Randall's question. So Sina, go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Yen, for a wonderful talk. So my question is, what are the main technological and technical differences between Perseverance Mars rover and the formerly deployed ones like Spirit and Opportunity and Curiosity Mars rovers?
Okay, yeah, so Spirit and Opportunity, the science payload is for geology, right? So it look into the rocks shape and maybe have some APXS, which is a X-ray shining on the material, and then get back to the science or the chemical component of those rocks. This is more like the geologist on the field geologist work. Curiosity has this onboard instrumentation that you can take more detail about those chemical, the compounds chemical, because we can kind of scoop a sand or scoop some rock sample and put it on board. shining with X-ray and get the spectrum. We have SAM, we can burning. So basically burn the material we want and smell it. So sort of like the detector with your nose, right? So you can know, say, is there methane? So things like that. But the point is, these instrument doesn't know big molecule like amino acid type of thing. For this rover, the main technology improvement, one is the AutoNav. So we use a totally different, I would say, different navigation software to increase our speed, probably 2 times the speed as before. Second is the sampling assembly. So this little robot inside the rover has a very different operation or the design component there. It's very complicated. Still remain to be seen if we can operate that, if we can get it in the harsh environment to do its work, and it's very very challenging, I would say. So that's what, in my view, is a big push for the technology side. I mean, certainly we have a lot of camera gets a lot of image back. We have the GoPro, point down, and we get a video come back. So,
thanks for the explanation.
Yeah.
Actually, next question by sorry, Dr. Yen, do you have a few minutes for a few more questions? You mentioned it's late for you.
Oh, sure.
Okay, sorry for this, because the kind of people very interested. So Randall has a question. Randall, do you want to speak out, or I read it for you? Okay, I think he probably want me to read it. Or can you see it? Can you see it in Q&A?
Q&A. Yeah, okay.
If not, I'll read it for you.
Yeah, the Q&A is
next to the.
I see. Okay. Okay, so the question is, any plan for Charter to develop more powerful robotic tools that can be used for lunar exploration, as for the creation of lunar mobility habit? Oh yes. This is a good. I think there's a push for lunar mission, the manned mission. The precursor for manned mission, as Sarah indicated, the precursor is some robot mission, right? So there's a lot of collaboration robots. So to build big habitat or expedition stuff, there's a need for robot to do it in a collaborative way. So those funding, I think, is coming. Is also across center. I think JSC has a lot of this research also. So JPL is work, especially our robotic section, is work with JSC, with the other center like AIMS, and doing all this. So the robotic tool side is, I think, mainly is for more autonomy, meaning they have to do things, the robot has to do more like autonomous motion way, right? So on the moon, on the lunar side, because if it depends on what kind of instrument you put on the robot, the robot can only work in the, say, in the lunar, daytime or something, and that leave like 10 days on Earth has to be, if you use the human joystick, there has to be like 10-day nonstop. So anyway, there's a lot of issue of building robot assist these lunar mission.
Yeah, that just show you a lot of great interest into this development, related to your work, perseverance, and all. There's a bright future.
Yeah.
We need you. Yeah, very important. I see Dr. Charles is hand still up. Dr.
Oh, no, sorry. I should, sorry.
Oh, no problem. Anytime.
Yeah.
Mike, I saw you raise hand briefly too. Do you have more questions?
Yeah, hi. I didn't think I was going to be able to ask it, but I will. So I was thinking of a proposal. How about parachuting a human robot on the Mars and seeing how it maneuvers to test future human exploration rather than nipping,
Six-wheel design. You want to change the six-wheel design? Is that?
Yeah. So it'd be like more human. Has that ever been thought of?
There's a lot of concept with different type of a robot. You can have a hopping robot. You can have walking robot and so on. But the wheeled vehicle is the most energy efficient. Yeah, you can. There's a lot of research on this area. I think you can find good papers talk about from the system level, all this type of robot. Some robot like more not humanoid, but it's like like the insect type robot, right? We designed. There's a DARPA. This is probably 6 years ago now. Robotic competition. They're like humanoid robot all over the place, being able to do some task in the like climbing up the ladder, open the door and stuff like that, and putting the ball in the hall. So I would suggest you to look into all that and come up with some sort of idea that can pass all the review. It would be very interesting because use your imagination. That's the first step to explore some Mars, right?
Thank you.
Mike. Yeah, Mike. I think my question is the last one. I think Mike, think about it. Actually, initially, this is related to Sarah's question about the speed. So when Dr. Yen showed up today, I was thinking maybe you would dress up like the F1, racer, with the uniform, hat or something like that, And Mike, think about it. Actually, Toyota is trying to hold a car race on the moon. So driving the wheeled car actually has a lot of excitement. Think about it, not necessarily just humanoid. So maybe next time Dr. Yen will be, driving this race car on the moon. You should dress up next time, F1, F1, Dr. Yen.
That's just very fast. Yes, the dynamics is very very hard to predict.
I understand. I mean, there's people kind of
there's no way to get around that time from sending a command to Mars and getting the information back. There's no real time. There's no way to do real time driving. There's just no way. there isn't a solution to that?
There are real-time communications to Mars, but it's very very expensive. We utilize this called deep space network, and only in a certain time window you can do that. Because the Mars has its own rotation, right? So when the Mars is not facing the Earth, then there's no communication. And we use real-time communication only occasionally to do very important thing like go and no go, things like that. Is very limited, I would say. The data rate is also very limited.
Yeah, actually, Mike, actually, I don't know, I think I mentioned to you, actually, there was a proposal by an associate fellow AIAA, Mr. Dan Adamo. He was from Johnson Space Center. He was proposing to use Deimos as a base. You know, they call it telepresence. And from there, astronaut can control the rovers on Mars more directly. So that's a possible proposal. I'll forward the link to Dr. Yen and the Mike.
I know that. I know.
You know that?
Yeah,
okay.
I know that astronaut will work with the
great.
JSC as well. You know, this is one way you can have human to sort of being in Mars because go to Mars, the infrastructure is very for human for astronaut to go to Mars. It's expensive, and then when you come back, right, you still need to have the ascending rocket and all that. You have to bring all that in, and you have to either manufacture some film locally, or you have to bring it with you. So there are system level consideration of that.
Dr. Yen, you're right. I mean, that proposal also because the energy consideration from rocket equation, those kind of things. Yeah, okay, thank you so much. I think Dr. Yen is busy, so we wish we can have another great opportunity in the future. So thank you so much, Dr. Yen. It's so impressive, really amazing. People get so excited.
Excellent talk.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Great job.
Yeah. Thank you for all the speakers today, and thank you for all your attendance. So look forward to see you next time in the AIAA Los Angeles Las Vegas section event. So stay tuned. Have a great Saturday, weekend. See you next time.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bob.